All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the 11:29 City Council workshop. It's 5 p.m. and we have lots on the agenda, but we'll start off with our Deschutes County Sheriff update. Lieutenant Davis. Just for the record, all the city councilors are here, so.
Good evening. Just a couple updates. I have a few things. I'm going to introduce Deputy Jared Pearson here in a minute to come up and just introduce himself to the council and staff. This last week we received a new patrol vehicle, new patrol Dodge pickup that Deputy Hudson will be driving, replacing one that he's been driving for several years, had racked up over 100,000 miles. And so we have a brand new Dodge pickup that some of you will see. It's equipped with a winch. Was the other truck that we had did not have a winch. So when we get out in the forest and doing things like that outside the city, whether it's rescuing a citizen or maybe even another deputy, which is not uncommon sometimes.
You have to be outside the city though. What if I need help inside the city?
We will, if you get in that big of a problem, we will come running. So, so you'll see that out and about. Deputy Josh Westfall, our school resource deputy, is over in the valley this week doing some threat assessment training for juveniles. So when they have an incident at the school or they're looking at threats or things like that with at-risk youth, he's going to be better trained in how to interact with the school and with our behavioral health people to do proper threat assessments on juveniles. We participated in the Holiday Palooza parade that was there with the mayor. So very good turnout for that. And I don't have anything else unless you have questions for me, and I'll bring Deputy Pearson up here.
Does anybody have any questions regarding statistics or anything like that? Doesn't seem like it, so.
Okay. Come on up, Jared. So Jared, just to introduce him a little bit, he came to our office just about 2 years ago.
A little over, yeah.
And he came to us from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. And in August, he started as one of our city assistant's deputies. So.
My name is Jared. Like he said, I've been a deputy here for about a little over 2 years. I started my career in the valley for the city of Troutdale, which is a small city along I-84. It borders Gresham, if anybody knows that. And then after doing a few years there, I became a member of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. So all in all, I have about 12 years experience. Around 2021, after about 200 days of rioting, I started looking at other places to move my family. I have family over here, so kind of pulled up stakes and Deschutes, got the job. Working west has kind of just been something I've done. There's not very many deputies that work out here, so it was a smooth transition for me to always work out here. And then when the position for sisters came up, it was a no-brainer for me, and I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. So let's just put it out there. This is better than Multnomah County, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll love to hear it.
On any day of the week and any hour of the day.
Yes. Yes. But very nice. The citizens couldn't be nicer. It's a huge change.
Well, it's good that you can make a decision for your family, not just career wise, but
yeah,
the whole.
Hard giving up all that seniority.
Yeah.
But also living in the West County, having a family and raising a family in the West County too is a big deal for us. A lot of buy-in for what we're doing out here.
Well, welcome to Sisters. And if there's anything you need, let us know.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Wave.
Yeah. Well, wave as we're going by at 35.
The bad news is you get the old pickup.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice meeting you. All right. Next up, we have Habitat for Humanity.
Good evening. Pete Hoover, Executive Director of Sisters Habitat for Humanity. Before we go on, Jared, if you need to sell that pickup, we need one for construction crew. So let's talk. Joe Rambo.
Joe Rambo, 304 East Adams Avenue here in Sisters. Before we get too far, I have a 12-year neighbor now of next door neighbor of Jack Nagel, and just so it's been a really difficult week for all of us. And I don't know where you are, Jack, but I miss you, and we didn't get to say goodbye. So, okay, we have I think we have 15 minutes allocated, and yesterday we started with about 24 pages of material, tried to condense it down to something a little bit more manageable. I'm now going to hit the timer. So, as a long story short, and not to go through this detail by detail, we could probably go to page 2.
Joe, can you put the mic in front of you, please?
How about that? Testing?
And you want to put the phone away from your,
There you go.
Yeah.
That's probably
Make
a
his
good idea.
mic buzz, not yours.
Make a long story short, lots of changes have been happening at Sisters Habitat over the last 6 months. And we have decided to refocus a little bit of our mission and to refocus and expand our mission into workforce housing, which is perhaps fraught with peril. And let's hope not. Only it seems like something that's it's been this problem that's been existing here for as long as I can remember. And I first came to Sisters in 1987. And then in 2000, I'm just thinking 2007, 2008, looking back when I was here, it was workforce housing, affordable housing was a problem then. And looking at it older Nugget articles, it's just been this ongoing problem that it feels like it's time for us to address and challenge. So here we are. We have, as you may or know, we purchased land in 2007 or 2006 with the intention of building a new restore on the Larch and Adams property. And that was the ongoing plan until, and had spent quite a bit of money on developing that until COVID hit. And then that got sheltered or then shuttered. And since then, the property has remained dormant. And there's been a lot of wondering what we can do with it. And the consensus is that its highest best purpose is not to put a 22,000 square foot, 2.5 story restore there with parking and a mezzanine level, and that it would fundamentally transform the town in perhaps not a positive way. And we collectively would like to transform our property into cottage cluster developments, and in the process of trying to acquire a few more lots and land along Adams Avenue and make that happen. So we've had a few meetings so far. Unfortunately, Susan, we have not had too much dialogue, but I met and we've talked with most of the rest of the council. And let's flip over to the next page, which is, okay. So this is kind of as a snapshot of Deschutes County. And over on the left-hand side, we've got area median income, which gives us an idea of what pretty easy to understand where we fall in for median incomes. What are the people that are correspond to those income levels, and what can they rent and what can they afford? And as you can see at the very top of the graph there, I believe it's the median home price, and that fluctuates a little bit. It was over $750,000. The closest new entry-level home here in Sisters is $570,000. And even at the top of the AMI chart, where we can't find a home for those people. And just, on a personal note, being here for the last 15 years, there is just the gulf between those that have and have not seems to be widening, and it's getting harder and harder to close that gap. Our traditional model, and up until about 18 months ago, home ownership up to about 60% AMI. And about 18 months ago, we slightly moved that up as we were having a more difficult time finding both candidates that could fit in that income level into the home and the affordability, the challenges have become harder and harder to reach down for single family home ownership below 60%. And so we opted to increase our plateau to 80%, but we are still having to turn away a lot of people. Two full-time McDonald's employees can't afford to, or they make too much money to purchase our traditional habitat home. There's no home for them and there's no place for them to get a house here in town. So anyway, we'll continue on. Ta-da. Basically, just going through our, wanting to expand our mission, taking our existing land and develop it. We currently have access to some really low interest financing that is of a revolving nature. It's money that's come back into a pool that we would like to apply for, and which enable us to acquire some more land with the intent of putting more cottage clusters along the Adams core. We're opting to move some of our target up to 80 to 120%, and I believe that's 150% AMI, because that sort of that's what the sisters code for workforce housing, that reaches up to 150% AMI. So we would like to cover all of those people. One of our guiding issues here is that we have, or I think we currently have 6 of our 17 employees make too much money to afford one of our homes. We can't house them, and they're commuting here from Redmond and trying to attract. I mean, we're just like everybody else. We have 17 employees, and just trying to attract new talent in the area and that aren't already living here has become extremely difficult. So off to the next. Here is our Adams Avenue property. In conjunction with their existing land, which is about 50,000 square feet. We are in dialogue with 3 other landowners along Adams Avenue and progressing along, and hope to make something else happen here shortly to add to our existing holdings, because in our cottage cluster situation, we can fit between 16 and 18 homes out there. And so we're really hoping to attain that 24 home threshold. And so we're going to need at least one other existing piece of parcel. Next page then. By focusing in the downtown corridor, it enables us to do a couple more things, which is we have the residential overlay, which allows us cottage cluster development, and using a little bit increased density by just focusing on a mixed income community or a both workforce and affordable housing. Allows us to shrink our lot size down a little bit further, down to the 1,500 square foot. Each lot then would have 500 square feet of green space that would go with it. So we're anticipating 16 homes on this cluster. We do intend to sort of focus the entire development as sustainable, off-grid, solar ready, solar carports, and trying to site all the buildings along here, because it seems to be the absolute perfect ideal location for both a walking community and solar ready. Next page, if possible. Right there. We're using and in dialogue with 4 different architects, 2 of which are in Washington that kind of specialize in cottage cluster developments, and 2 in Eugene. So this is one of the sort of traditional 900 square foot, 950 square foot house. They're about 16 feet wide, anywhere 36 to 39 feet long, and typically 2 stories. But we are intending to have at least 4 single floor bedrooms. It's the next one. Here are some of we anticipate currently that our overall cost is just under $7 million. That doesn't include the land that we already own. And then we're just kind of going through a little bit of where we would look for.
Excuse me, Joe, can you pull the microphone up? People are having a hard time.
Yes, I can. Thank you. Where we would look for our traditional funding for affordable home sources, which is not, this isn't money that we could have access to that would build workforce housing. Next page. This is so trying to find ways that Sisters Habitat and the city here can partner. And so, and have some dialogues about things that could assist us in achieving, I think, a mutual goal. We have, so we wanted to talk about the urban renewal agency funds, reserve funds, and we've had some dialogue, and we would like to talk more about SDC deferral to help us along with the timing and spacing of our construction project, as well as the Adams Street improvement projects and the possibility of an SDC credit from that. And we know that we're kind of in the beginning of the process here, and what we are mostly looking for is right now is to open some dialogue and kind of develop a partnership going forward to and see if our vision will align with yours. And the other component that would be quite helpful is we have quite a few funding. Our funding grant cycle is coming up in the next few months, and so Peter and I will be spending quite a bit of time on lift funding and some other outside funding sources will help us acquire some property. So getting a MOU or some commitment from the city that something expresses alignment with what we're hoping to do here. One more page and that gets us to the end.
Couple of items I'll just to augment Joe's commentary. I want to make sure that there's understanding that this is in addition to, this is to supplement what we're already doing in the affordable housing arena. So we're not pulling away from affordable housing. We're continuing with our development in Village Meadows and Brooks Camp and Woodlands. So I just want to be very clear on that this workforce housing is not distracting us from our primary mission of providing affordable housing for the Sisters community, which, as I believe we've presented in earlier conversations with the council, we've significantly increased the number of homes that we're producing in a year from what the traditional history of Sisters Habitat has been. So we're pleased and proud by that. Also, like to emphasize that we truly appreciate the cooperation and conversations that we have had with city staff. One of our goals is to make sure that what we are envisioning for this property is in line with what the city has announced regarding your housing needs and also the environmental sustainability considerations. We've taken steps to make sure that those are incorporated into our plan, and certainly want to continue those dialogues with the city and city staff to make sure that we continue in that alignment. We truly, as Joe mentioned, want this to be a partnership with the city. So thank you for your time on that.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody's probably got a question or you want to start? Do you have any questions you might want to ask?
Some of my questions actually were handled by the presentation in terms of if there were some form of partnership and dedication of city funds, excuse me, and some of the other things mentioned in here. I want to be sure that the property stays as affordable and workforce housing as it's sold and moved along. And it looks like you're looking at deed restrictions and those sorts of things to ensure that that indeed occurs. Are they a lifetime type restriction or a 20-year? Do you have a sense of how you typically, I don't know how you typically operate on those sorts of things.
We to understand, it would be a minimum of 30 years.
Okay.
And with the idea then at each time in between that 30 years, if the home were to passed on, that it would restart the clock.
Yep.
That seems to be a pretty common approach. We could go out to 99 years here in Oregon, but we also want to balance both affordable home ownership and our mission of generational wealth creation. So there is, it seems like there is something to reward for a family or a reward for somebody to pay the home off. So
Totally agree. And like I said, that removes some of my concerns, and thank you for the information.
It would either be either solely or a combination of deed restrictions and land trust.
Yeah.
Sisters Habitat does have a land trust, not a cattle trust, but a land trust. And so that's what we're utilizing in some of our developments. And it's envisioned that will be one of the options that we will be considering for the added commons.
Thank you.
Councilor Cobb, you have any questions?
Yeah, so I'm a little confused, because we started out with saying that we're really concerned about workforce housing. And then you made mention that you want it up to 180 AMI?
No, 150 AMI, because that matches,
150?
that matches the city of Sisters definition of workforce housing is 80 to 150%. So that matches the code for the definition of workforce housing.
Okay, well, so I guess,
We anticipate tr- the idea is having a mixed income development of roughly equal workforce housing and roughly equal affordable housing. So continuing with our normal mission, doubling down on our normal mission,
uh-huh,
and then adding on to that with workforce housing.
okay, and so Habitat's a nonprofit, is that correct?
That is
Right.
correct.
501c3.
Right, so, what happens with the profit? I mean, relative,
I don't understand where it'd be very difficult to factor in any profit in this, in any,
oh, okay,
there's no, it's not, we're not doing this as a profit. We're just trying to build homes that, other people can afford. Currently, there's lots and lots of subsidies out there, especially for rental housing.
uh-huh,
And specifically for multifamily density rental housing, there's abundant resources. There is far less, there's about a tenth of that that's available for affordable single family home ownership.
okay,
And that goes up to about the 80% AMI level. And beyond that, there's no money out there. So
Okay.
we're going on our own to do this.
right, so, I
Right,
mean,
so-
you're basically the developer,
We are the development, so
Right.
we are capped by the maximum amount we could sell the home based on the area median income. So if we went back just to the beginning chart at 120% of AMI, or the chart that shows.
Yeah.
So that kind of, if you go over to the corresponding, then that'll show, that's the maximum amount, the sale price of the home. And we're targeting, at 115% area median income in Deschutes County right now at 6.5% income, that works out to roughly $415,000. And so to build a house for $415,000, that's almost 1,000 square feet with real estate at $175,000 a lot and with $300 a square foot. I mean, there's the profit is not going to be something that we're going to have to worry about what to do with
okay.
I'm-
Okay, you mentioned in the presentation that, you're thinking about wanting a change to the code where the second floor level needs to have more space than the first floor, but the, plan that you show, I'm not an expert on reading
Sure.
plans,
Sure.
but it doesn't look like this second floor. Is that the second floor?
That is the second floor, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's smaller than the first floor, so I'm not understanding why you need more space.
It is smaller, but by code definition, the second floor needs to be 50% or less of the square footage.
Oh, and that's not 50%.
And it is designed where they don't count the space of a garage,
Ah,
or they count that in the first floor. They give you
Okay.
a bonus up for the garage. And we're looking at smaller lots, less car oriented, more pedestrian friendly, less garage dependent, more carport dependent. And if
okay,
you take the garage component out of that, then it makes the calculations of how much volume we can put in the second story.
okay,
So we're typically looking at 30-foot by 50-foot lots or thereabouts, which with setbacks, we're under a 20-foot wide by 36-foot long is our maximum footprint inside of that.
gotcha.
And so that's 720 square feet, and 50% of that, takes you up to 1,000 square feet. And so, but the code says we can go to 1,200, but we are hoping to stay, we're not hoping, we intend to stay under to keep things affordable at the 800 to 900 square foot level.
Okay,
And for clarity, these homes that Joe included in the presentation, those are illustrative samples.
Right.
They're not the actual
The final,
design that
yeah.
we're going to be
I
using.
was just trying to
It is,
understand the need for
Yes.
the
It
change.
would be representative of the theme and what we intend the place to look like.
Mhm.
But and by the cottage development code, each little cluster needs to have 4 different sort of little homes in there. So they're all going to look different. So they're not going to be uniform.
Okay,
And when we intend to blend 4 different architects over 4 different, so we have a little bit of variety and not just a uniformity. The intention is for this place is if we drive down Larch Avenue on our way to the post office, whether it's somebody that lives here in town or whether it's a a visitor coming to town, they look over and they like looking at, and what is that place? How do I get over there? And you've got to be kidding. Sisters has affordable housing like that. This is the place I want to be. So this is not an intention of putting a blight on the downtown. This is something that we all as a community and as an organization are going to be proud of. And with us tonight, I've got half of our board here, so we've got a quorum if we need to make some decisions, but
All in favor?
Okay, that's all for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Letts?
Since it's a, kind of a multifamily situation, you know, with a deed restriction or land trust or something like that,
Yeah.
it'll be mostly like common space. And who takes care of that common space? Will there be like an HOA or
Yep.
Habitat takes care of that, or
it'll be an
the
HOA.
owners, well,
The cottage development, it'll be
it'll be its own
an
HOA.
easier way to think of it is if you could take Woodlands and you could take Pine Meadow and you shrink everything down about 900 feet and you put some pathways in and you stick it 3 blocks over there. So
Okay.
lots of grass, lots of walking, and lots of solar panels. Yes.
And then I mean, I know we've had some conversations in the past, but you just for public record, and you've had some conversations with Pacific Crest Affordable Homes, who owns the property to the north of this, and that is kind of a non-starter at this point to partner with them.
We've had some conversations with the owner, Pacific Crest, and it appears that they are not at a point that they are ready to develop the property or to partner with anyone else on developing the property.
As it has
Yes.
been for numerous years.
Yes.
We recently found out about our that we had several opportunities to purchase that property in the past that unfortunately we didn't.
That was years ago, yeah.
That was way back in the day. So
Back when it was affordable.
back when it
Back when it was
under-
affordable, yes, there was that little detail.
Yes, back when it was under $400,000 for the entire thing.
Could I insert a quick question?
Yeah. No, it's okay. I forgot my last
I-
question.
Just a quick one. On STRs,
Mhm.
so is there going to be some kind of ruling to make sure that these are not STRs?
I would,
Okay,
yes.
all right, good.
Part of the motivation is that's, I live downtown. I have, and we planted our flag here. And so I would prefer, to do whatever I can to shape the area that I live in. So
Thank you.
And Susan, so that you know, if the option is for the land trust model, our land trust has restrictions that limit the amount of time that the owner cannot be using that residence as their primary occupancy. So the short-term rentals are not going to be an issue.
Thank you.
And that's both, I believe, in the master master lease, as well as I know it's for sure, it's in the deed restrictions in the deed of trust.
That's good news. Thank you.
it would seem that short-term rentals would be anathema to the intention of the.
And my last question is just what is your projected timeline for this project?
Our aspirational goal is to be pouring footings and stem walls next October, between October 1st and October 15th. So working backwards from there with the intention of having this thing done and complete in 36 months following that.
Well,
And just to, in order to do this, this is not the normal habitat model. And this is all going to be fortunately or unfortunately we're going to sub every dollar of it, every component of it out. So
Which enables us to have the greatest impact in the shortest period of time.
And I've heard the presentation, so I will allow other people their time.
Yeah, and I don't have a question really. I did want to make a couple comments. One is exciting, nice to see the new partnership, I would say is a fair thing to say. And I think that we definitely want to look at this and see how we can work together on it. And I can't sit here and say that everything you want, you're going to get, but at the same time, I think that every item can be looked at each to their own and see how it works and see how we can make something work, which is, it's fair to say that we do need more affordable housing and a cottage development like this, which really hasn't been done is pretty neat to see. The other comment I'll make is maybe just a suggestion and a reminder, and this isn't to be critical at all. But Sisters is a pretty special place, and we're glad that you're partnering with us and you're doing what you're doing, and your history is good. I just remind you, you're also partnering with the community itself, and so just keep that outreach going and make sure everybody kind of knows what's going on and get some feedback from just the community itself. I think you're going to get very good reception for the most part, especially if you are able to create those unique units as I've seen. And I'm really interested in learning more about those pre-approved cottage plans, such as you mentioned from the city of Eugene. I think that that's a really interesting concept. And just for the people in the audience, the city of Eugene has four models of affordable housing that are already designed and engineered, and you can buy them from the city for $500, which is really inexpensive. And I think that there's something to be said for that, and maybe that's something that we can emulate possibly in the future. Right.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much.
One last question I forgot to ask, and I think I know the answer, but priority would be given to individuals who work in the Sisters area for this housing. We're talking about Sisters workforce housing and trying to eliminate those commuting miles for folks from Redmond and Bend or living in our forest, of course.
People that work, priority will be
Yeah.
definitely given for people that are.
Thank you. I just
that
wanted to hear you
live
say it.
and or
I knew
work
that
in
was the
Sisters.
answer, but
Yes.
I wanted it on the record.
Yeah.
I have one last. So, that's okay, Mayor? Yeah, okay. You mentioned that, it's going to be environmentally sustainable, maybe solar.
Mhm. I will just so you know that last night the board, finally, after an 18 months dragging and screaming, we voted and approved putting solar panels on all of our upcoming Village Meadow homes. So look forward to seeing those here shortly.
Nice,
So
nice. To that, we're looking at fire safety code.
Mhm.
Yes, okay, good. That's all I wanted to know.
we've got all sorts of, as I said, we had to condense 24 pages down. So I didn't want to,
Well, and I had,
it's a 3-hour presentation rolled down into 5 minutes. So
yeah, and I didn't have a chance to talk with you guys, so
Yeah.
sorry for all
and
all my
we
questions.
would love to come back and dive in quite a bit deeper. So anyway.
And you can find her at Fika Coffee once in a while.
Yeah.
That's true.
Sorry, I outed you there. She drinks coffee.
Shout out for Pika.
Hey, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming,
you.
and we're looking forward to more conversations about this.
As are we.
All
So
right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on. We have about an hour to go over the next two items, and they're pretty meaty themselves. The next topic is Northwest Housing Alternative Project update. More affordable housing on the agenda.
Actually, was just meeting with Peter earlier today. so
There you go.
Been chatting a bunch here over the last couple months.
Please identify yourself.
Yes, yeah. So Clayton Crowhurst, housing developer, Northwest Housing Alternatives. And we've been working with y'all for quite a while on what we're working title of Trinity Place over on Trinity Way for affordable and workforce rental housing. And so I think the big update, which I think got shared at the last council meeting, was that we did receive the funding that we applied for from OHCS. That includes almost 10 million in GHAP grant funds. That was that small projects funding source I was targeting. Also includes ag worker housing tax credits. So we can actually set aside some units specifically for folks in ag, which is kind of an expansive definition. And we're maybe exploring adding even more units as that's set aside. And then also some other tax credits that will actually buy down interest rate on our mortgage at the end of the day. I've still got some fundraising to do, as with any project, and Peter and I were commiserating about this. Any construction project right now, we're always having little gaps and stuff. So over the next year and a half, I'm going to be working on kind of plugging those. But our overall project schedule is kind of throughout 24 is we're going to be working through design, land use, permitting, partition and acquisition of the actual property itself, with a goal to break ground kind of early 25 and then be leasing up units in 2026. And so I think the good part of that schedule is that it meets kind of the conditions of the ARPA funds that the city's awarded and gotten, kind of procured through the county. Obviously, that's still a ways out. We still have a lot of steps to take. I think part of this next year is also going to involve a lot of community outreach, a lot of conversations. I think one of the groups specifically we're going to be chatting with are our neighbors, which a good many of them are Habitat homeowners. And so I think that's a, great opportunity to not only, tweak the project to make it fit into the neighborhood itself, but also just make sure that we're, sensitive and hearing, kind of some of the, I would say both concerns, but maybe, ways that we can actually add some amenities to that neighborhood in form of, playground, walking space, other stuff like that. So, yeah, I'll keep kind of the overall project, overview at this point short, just to give you all time for any questions that have come up over the last couple of months or specific to where things are at right now.
Fantastic. So how big are some of those gaps? I mean, is it because of material costs and labor costs of construction? in
Yeah.
general?
And so I would say we're, on, let's say a 17 to $18 million project, we're in $1 million, $1.5 million gap, which I know this is the curse of my job is we throw numbers around with many zeros, like it's not a big deal. Yes, that is that's a sizable chunk of money as a percentage of the overall project cost. That's very achievable. I think we just some of the regional funding sources in terms of our health council, COIC, as well as some of the foundations that we have a good relationship with. That seems totally doable on our end. So, I would say at this point with that large tranche of money from OHCS, this project's moving forward.
Great. All right. Go ahead.
Just a comment, no questions. I'm real pleased with the news. I'm pleased with what I'm hearing. It's always fun to see you here. You leave me feeling energized and hopeful. And that's been that way since the first day you walked in the door here. And I can't say that having been through several large construction projects in my professional career, that I've left those meetings with the same feeling of anticipation and excitement. So thank you.
Well, let's bank some of that. So, when I pick out a paint color you don't like or something like that, I can have some extra goodwill to go off of, but I appreciate that.
As long as it's not mustard, I have Erica do elementary school.
Yeah. No, I will not be doing that.
Oh, no questions.
No,
Yeah.
and thank you. I'm also pleased. Yeah.
Councilor
Appreciate it.
Metz?
No, thank you for the update. I've spoken with some people in the community over the last few months that have, spoken with you on this project and just all good feedback. People are hearing, they're hearing what they need to hear from you, and that's very positive. So
Yeah.
we're spying on you is what I'm saying, but
Yeah, that's fine.
We're trolling, yes, completely.
It's like I'm a very open person. So, and I would say to that point, if anybody on the council or just in general hears from a group in town or an organization that would like to hear more from me, I'm a constant face in communities all over the state for Rotaries and Kiwanis and all of that. So I'm more than happy to give those presentations. There's no group too small, so.
Yeah, I was just thinking about our EDCO roundtable that Eric Strobel had going at the Sisters Bakery.
Yep.
And, the discussion was on housing and that went really well too. And I think the businesses were really interested in hearing about that project and enjoyed hearing from you too. So.
Yeah, bonus points if a organization can put pastries out there like they did. for that
Yeah,
one.
and they had boxes to take home too.
Yes,
That was
yeah.
crazy.
Given where the funding is coming, from, are we still on track to be able to have some flexibility about the income levels of the people who can live in this facility.
Yeah, yeah. And so right now we do have, so the project pro forma, kind of the financial plan for operations, income levels, all of that is pretty set, but we have several levels. We are capped by the OHCS funds we received at 80% AMI, kind of on the upper end, which, you know, is really, you know, kind of great. And I think, you know, our friends over here at Habitat illustrate the point of we need multiple different housing types. I'm one tool in the toolbox, and Peter and Habitat are another tool in the toolbox. You know, some of their cottage developments can start at 80 and then go up to 150. But yeah, so we're gonna have units at 80% upper income restriction, 60, and then a handful at 50. And rents kind of corresponding to those income levels so that we can have, you know, different, you know, let's say we've got somebody that's a starting position at seed to table. They might be a better fit for a 1-bedroom 50% unit, whereas 2 full-time income earners, you know, with 2 kids may be a better fit for a 3-bedroom at 80%.
And what sort of controls, if any, do we have over who gets the housing?
Yeah. So in the multifamily world, I don't really have any sticks. I do have a big bag of carrots though. And so that's really where I think the partnerships with local organizations are going to be really critical, and something I've already been working on for the last year or so. One of them that we actually went into our funding application with is Family Access Network. You know, we're going to have 5 to 10 units set aside for their families. You know, I think pretty much all of them are going to be local to sisters here. Also on the ag worker front, you know, we're talking with Seed to Table, Lazy J, Mahoney Guards, others, you know, especially through the High Desert Food and Farms Alliance, so that we can really target kind of some of the local ag and folks that are working in those fields. So, you know, and then I don't want to necessarily go on record right now, but we have a lot of conversations going with other local partners to kind of solidify some more of those referral preferences or other kind of soft touch ways of really getting folks who are in the community here kind of onto wait lists in the door. You know, because we cannot ask or say, hey, what's your zip code when you're filling out an application? That's something we're legally not allowed to do. But we can really incentivize through that partnership building, you know, getting people into housing that are, you know, folks in the community here.
We want you to work your magic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Very excited.
Yeah, duly heard. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and lastly, thanks for talking to Habitat. I think that, you know, having you guys, you know, talk with each other about sisters area concerns and stuff is really, really nice to see. This isn't adversarial, or, you know, we're all headed for the same goals. And so partnerships, you know, you can't say enough about that. So thanks for doing that too. So, because I think you guys can really, I was hoping that that was going to happen. I think I even mentioned it when I met with Habitat last week, hoping that you guys would kind of get together. And you just never know when something absolutely new or fresh can come out of conversations like that.
Yeah.
And they could be small things or big things. You never know.
Yep.
So, any other?
Yeah, so in the previous discussion, we were gonna prioritize locals first, and then you just said that legally you cannot ask what the zip code is of the person who's purchasing,
Correct. Yeah. So renting.
renting.
Yeah. Mhm.
And if someone's purchasing.
So homeownership it's a little bit different game legally in terms of the affirmative fair housing requirements around homeownership. Obviously, you know, I'm no expert on the homeownership front, but it is a little different. For rental, we have a lot of folks that are looking over our back when it comes to the legal requirements around that. Every one of our projects that we send through the state for funding We actually, as part of the application process, have to put together, an affirmative fair housing marketing plan and also a commitment to abide by fair housing regulations. Part of that is requirements around not excluding based on residency.
Okay. And can you exclude based on whether it's a corporation that wants to buy a bunch of the homes or rent a bunch of the homes?
So we cannot master lease. So like,
Oh.
let's say, a business, wanted to master lease like 10 units. We're not set up to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And yeah, definitely no short-term rentals. Yeah.
short-term
we're-
rentals.
Yeah, that's yeah. So, and I will say to your comment, Mayor, that just, I've been having a lot of conversations, not only with Habitat, but also Woodlands folks, Rooted Homes. I think all of us in the housing world are very much big tent kind of folks, and
Yeah.
we very much like to collaborate and also recognize in a community this small that we never want to be in a position where we're competing for the same funding source. And so I think that collaboration is super critical to all of us.
Okay. Any?
One more
Oh.
question. Are you gonna need anything else from us, moving forward financially, besides the 500,000 seed money? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna actually have
Yeah.
them lock the
Pass it
doors and
around.
pass the hat around. I won't completely rule off the table that, I'm seeing if, hey, county, do you have, any unallocated ARPA funds at the end of the day? There is a trigger point for me of going over 750,000 of federal money. I go into prevailing wage territory, which I am very inclined not to. But if the county had an additional, 249K of ARPA funds kicking around at the end of the day, I would not say no to that. So, but other than that, I think mostly, at this stage in the game, it's going to be, we've kind of met all the conditions of the award letter that y'all approved earlier this year. I'll actually send in our reservation letter once we execute that with the state to kind of say, hey, we've reserved funds before the end of this year. And then we'll be moving on to finalizing the grant agreement with y'all. And then just going into kind of the procedural land use partition, that kind of stuff. And then later next year, building permits with the county.
Okay. Virtual champagne for everybody. tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Clayton. I know you're working hard on this. Doing a good job. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Appreciate y'all.
All right. All right. Next up, Wildfire Hazard Mitigation Building Code Defensible Space Code Update. Mr. Martin. And Chief,
Oh, bonus.
good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, commissioners and all those in attendance here in person and those remotely. I'm Matthew Martin, City of Sisters Community Development Department. And I'm trying to introduce and get myself oriented here at the same time, so bear with me. As the mayor noted, we have a workshop here to introduce a project to the council and the community regarding updating, expanding, evaluating defensible space standings and defensible space standards and building hardening requirements to mitigate the impacts of wildfire here in the City of Sisters. Introduced myself. As the mayor noted, I'm joined by Chief Roger Johnson with the Sisters Camp Sherman Fire District. Also want to acknowledge that Clara Butler and Heather Miller with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office are in attendance and in support and partnership, as the mayor noted, on other projects with regard to this important topic. As we're all well aware, we live in a fire adaptive climate and have a history of wildfire, both small and large, that have been in close proximity to the City of Sisters, on our back door or back steps, and throughout the region, and seen the significant impacts that's had on not only our landscape but our economies associated with property loss and all that goes into it. The purpose of tonight's workshop is to introduce a project that was identified by the city council as a priority and a goal to accomplish in the forthcoming year. That goal being work toward updating defensible space and structural hardening requirements through the development code. Again, this is a recognition of that increased understanding and increased risk associated with wildfire in the region as the community grows in what's known to be the wildland urban interface, and acknowledging the changing in environmental and climatic conditions exacerbating those risks. So that's what brings us here today. The intent is not to really dive into the details of what strategies can be employed, but just to lay out what those strategies that are available and provide some examples of what we have here locally on the horizon with this on the statewide scale, and look to other examples that the communities in the region have employed to address the issue, and to get your input, counselors, on what your priorities, thoughts are on the concepts, and identify kind of what those directions we should focus on as we implement the project. So I do want to begin with an overview of what defensible space and structural hardening is, dive into the existing City of Sisters code standards that we have in place today, highlight the upcoming standards on the statewide scale in response to Senate Bill 762 and Senate Bill 80. And then I highlight some best practices that we've identified as good examples in the state of Oregon regarding how to best implement defensible space and building hardening. I do want to pause there and provide some opportunity for some introductory comments, if you like.
I think you're covering it well. I do appreciate the council's focus on this issue. It's a critical issue, I think, for our community, not just because of the fire history, but you know, a lot of these issues that Matt is going to talk about certainly are coming towards us from the state, with state adoptable defensible space code. The wildfire risk map is going to be coming. So there are some regulations that the community is going to be faced with. So I think it's really good to have the options ahead of or in conjunction with that. I think it's very practical, and you know, we appreciate being engaged on it and appreciate the focus that you're paying towards it.
We're headed the right direction.
I think you are.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I really want to highlight that recognizing that there are standards and changes coming with regard to development from a statewide and state level down. We are in a position to be able to take some local control of that and implement some standards that are either ahead of the implementation of those standards or broader than what's required by those statewide standards. So with that, let's talk about defensible space and building hardening. Again, just acknowledging that we're just a high level introduction of what it means, and get the council oriented as well as the community. So defensible space is that vegetation management in proximity to existing structures, and in particular homes and buildings other than accessory structures. And the concept is that in closer proximity to the structure, you have a non-combustible region or area. And then as you move farther out, that you begin to remove those ladder fuels or underbrush and other vegetation that could ignite and then spread the fire through those areas. So what's displayed on the screen is an example provided by the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. And acknowledging that this is one of a multitude of reputable organizations that offer recommendations and strategies to implement defensible space in this case. So what you'll see here are some graphics or numbers that may not specifically align to what the state of Oregon's looking to implement or further what other communities have done. But this gives you an example of what we're talking about. So being that immediate zone, that first interface with the structure itself and out to 5 feet. This is generally known as the kind of a non-combustible zone, where you're not having any combustible materials or vegetation within that area. So what we'd be looking to do there, for example, is instead of having the bark mulch that has traditionally been perhaps in close proximity to homes or structures, that being replaced with a hardscape or a non-combustible, such as gravel or concrete or other materials that aren't as flammable, or other fire resistant plants with some spacing, etc., that reduces that immediate ignition zone or actually catching the structure on fire. Then as you move out to that intermediate zone, kind of known to be that 5 to 30 feet ring around the structures, that's when we begin to look to reducing those ladder fuels. That's the underbrush or dead branches or low hanging branches of trees that allow a fire that may be moving across the forest floor, the ground, to then ignite those ladder fuels and work their way up into the canopy of the trees. Cutting off those ladder fuels then eliminates that opportunity for the fire to move up into a tree or the tree stands. Also in this area, you begin to look to have tree spacing amongst, or canopy spacing amongst trees, to eliminate or reduce the risk of a crown fire or fire leaping from tree to tree. I do want to acknowledge that what we're talking about, reducing or removing vegetation, it's not requiring you to create a moonscape or a desertscape with no vegetation or just no shade or other elements and amenities that come with that. So acknowledging and honoring City of Sisters being Tree City USA, we will be able to maintain that with at the same time creating and maintaining defensible spaces to reduce this risk. Also want to note that when we're talking about canopy, it's not from individual tree to individual tree. There's acknowledgement that clusters of trees can serve as one canopy. So if you have a grouping, that can be in one portion of the property, but then creating that break between the trees to reduce that fire jumping. What I've seen is kind of a standard measurement is somewhere between 10 feet or greater to create that separation between the structures. And then we move into the extended area. That spacing of trees is reduced because it's not as much of a threat to the structures itself, but also still looking to maintain and reduce the ladder, maintain the reduction in ladder fuels, removing those ladder fuels along the forest floor. And again, recognizing that when we're talking about existing vegetation or introduced vegetation, we want to be mindful of the species, that they be of a fire resistant type, or removing those that are of a greater ignition threat and with high oil contexts or compositions. So I'll pause there and
Yep.
Chief, if you have
A common question people have is, I don't have 100 feet, or there's a house right next to me. How can I treat that? And the code only asks that you do that to the property line. So so people don't have to go onto the neighbor's property, and that would be a bad thing. And you know, what they've found is that immediate zone, that 0 to 5 foot zone, is one of the most critical things that indicates whether a home will survive in a wildfire or not. It's what you have right up next to your house. It's on the porch. It's things that you have under the deck, stored on the deck. Those types of things are the most critical. So I think that's where the Defensible Space Code really works on those issues, provides some latitude for clusters of trees. There sometimes are questions about how high do I have to limit tree, and there certainly are standards. I think it's 6 feet up, but if you have a small decorative tree, it's like a third of the tree height. You don't want people to make limb a 7-foot tree up 6 feet because doesn't work very well long-term. So it is fairly common sense and it's fairly simple, I think, to meet the intent of the code.
Thank you for that. And I think, this is an opportunity to pause and acknowledge that while the council's goal specifically stated updates to the development code, strategies I've noticed, including what we have currently in our code, is utilizing both the development code, which applies to new development of properties, but also the municipal code that applies just ongoing. So there are different strategies that can be employed to address different aspects of defensible space, building hardening and mitigating wildfire. Perhaps this is a good opportunity to pause and any questions specific to defensible space.
You have some, Councilor Cobb?
Yeah, so your preface, basically, if I understand correctly, you want to keep this conversation just to more about defensible space and not so much fire mitigation. Am I correct?
Well, want to offer this overview, but if there's some strategies or concepts that you'd like to be explored through the project, certainly open to those comments.
Yeah, I emailed several comments, but I'll briefly share them so the public hears. I was concerned about the lack of buffer between small lot spaces like these that we have like off of Larch Street. And I was also concerned about some of those streets in different areas in town are not wide enough for a fire truck to get by a parked car. And there's several parked cars, and I'm just hoping that the city is going to look at ways to figure out how to make those safe so that a fire truck can get through. And then I was concerned that because we are a WUI, a wildfire urban interface city, I was concerned that we might want to throw out to the public the idea of banning any kind of fun fires like bonfires or firecrackers or just as a standard for our town, just to be a little more careful. And then I was worried about the larger properties around town. We do allow fire fuel burning certain times of the year. And I'm wondering if we need to look at that code and maybe tighten it up even more. And then lastly, the electrical grid is mostly for new development. I know it's under the ground, but there are some areas in town that have poles, and we've seen in recent history that can cause quite a bit of problem pushing a fire through a town. So I'm hoping that the city could maybe look at a plan for, eventually getting rid of those. So those were just my points. Thanks.
I appreciate those, and we could touch on some of those later on. And what I'm picking up from those comments is that what we're talking about is defensible space and building hardening, and there's a much broader, more comprehensive approach to addressing the risks of fire in all aspects, and the different departments or jurisdictions and different utility providers, other partners that fit into that puzzle of addressing it. I do want to, as Chief noted, the expectation would be to maintaining a defensible space only on your property and not an issue with an adjacent lot, but also acknowledging more dense development. A strategy could be employed that as part of any larger development, subdivision, master plan, commercial developments, but let's highlight subdivision, that we're getting a mitigation strategy throughout that development on the front side. So there's a collaborative effort. There's if it's deed restrictions or other CC&Rs that beholden those individual property owners to work together to address the issue as a collective. So there's different strategies there.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions at this point?
I'll just say that the one flaw in that graphic is that the 5-foot fire-free zone needs to go around the garage as well. It's been a little bit of a pet peeve, but yeah, a lot of explodey things in garages, so. But otherwise,
But it's just a
but
graphic.
But it's a nice graphic, yes. Yeah.
What are you guys doing in your garage? I
I
wanna
think
know.
that's the fire, it's a fire service term, right? Thanks.
Technical term.
Yeah, yeah.
Acknowledging that this is a graphic produced by one of many organizations that provide expertise, but you can take that up in FPA.
Yeah.
All right. I think you can move forward.
Okay, moving to building hardening. This is where we're looking at the structure itself, and we're focusing on home hardening because that's where we can utilize building code standards that have been created to address the fire resilience or resistance capabilities of a structure. This graphic is just to highlight those different elements of a structure that can be susceptible and opportunities for improving a property to reduce that fire risk associated with a building. Some of which are just your ongoing maintenance or practices around your property. Again, that's installing and maintaining good vegetation or the lack thereof in structure that we already spoke of. And maintaining your gutters or other accumulation of debris or vegetative material. So that's just kind of ongoing to increase the resistance of the structure. But there are elements that you can do associated with the structure itself, the construction of it. So highlighting a few, we're kind of work our way from the top down, beginning with the roof. Of course, that's installing and maintain a good roof that is of a classification of a high fire resistance. Fortunately, and now in Deschutes County and City of Sisters specifically, there is a prohibition on cedar shake or other wood roofing material. So we already have that kind of standard in place today. But it's one to install that roof. It's also necessary to have it maintained in good condition and replacing those lost or broken shingles that could be a penetration point for any fire or embers. Then the vents or any other penetrations that are there in both the roof as well as any foundation vents. Installing screening that does prohibit or eliminate most fire embers from being drifting and working its way into the attic or underneath the structure that then could combust and become a hazard and a risk to the structure. Eaves serve as one of those penetration points as well if you don't have a proper screening or the installation of fire resistant or non-combustible materials within those eave areas. Windows can be one of those penetration points for fire, either with heat causing failure of the window to either shatter, creating that clear opportunity for fire combustion, or if it's, for example, with vinyl windows, can be known to melt and deform, creating gaps or opportunities for those. We're not talking about flames or impingement, the fire actually touching the structure to begin with, but rather radiance or ember drift from a fire that may be some distance away. So that, coupled with appropriate siding that's fire resistant to resist those impacts of fire. Touching on those being those elements of any fire code, building code that can be implemented here within the City of Sisters to reduce those risks. I do want to note, with fencing is a constructed element that can be addressed, creating a buffer between that combustible wooden fencing materials Not saying that you necessarily need to remove all wooden fencing unless that's a policy that the city would like to employ, but rather going back to that 5 foot immediate zone within defensible space, looking for a gap between that combustible wood fence and that gap being filled with non-combustible metal gate or other materials that create that separation. And then you get into just how you use your structure, your building, by storing those explodey things that are either potentially in your garage, under your deck, or other materials there. So I'll just pause there. Any comments?
Yep. I think you covered it really well, Matt. A lot of times there's questions about what is the cost to do that? It seems like it'd be expensive to build a home to meet these standards. And I would say that a lot of these elements are already being utilized in construction. So it's double pane windows. I don't know if you can buy a single pane window today anyway. So most buildings are built with double pane windows. Asphalt composition shingles meet the fire code for building hardening. So they're all a Class A rated roof. So the roof is already taken care of. The windows are already taken care of. What you're really talking about is the size of the mesh venting in the eave vents and in the soffits. They like to see 1/8 of an inch or less instead of 1/4 inch. A lot of the older venting was 1/4 inch, and embers can fly through that venting. So you're talking a little smaller venting and then siding material. And a lot of builders already use a fiber cement type siding, which meets the building code. And you know, it's attractive, it lasts a long time. And so a lot of builders are already using that over a natural wood type siding anyway. So I would say there are some studies that have been done on the costs, but you'll hear different things from different people on the cost of it. But just recognize a lot of the elements are already being used by builders today.
Okay, any questions about any of that?
Just a comment, you can buy a single pane window, cost you about twice what a double pane window costs.
Yeah, yes, that's correct, Counselor. And again, the double pane windows, they hold up a lot better. There's that air gap in between, and if a fire, intense heat impacts the outer window, sometimes they'll crack, but the inner window will remain intact sometimes for a lot longer, and it provides just time for the fire to pass through and keep from getting inside the building. So that's how it works and why it's important.
And on the building hardening side, Matt, if you can answer, that's generally through municipal code because this is already developed property. Is that correct? Or
Correct. And
Okay.
that's how it's been employed with the current roofing standards. So
Okay.
there's that, and making that connection to and this is part of our partnership with Deschutes County Building Safety Division, which if we adopt any specific building code provisions, that we'd be looking to them to ensure that the structures comply with any adopted building code standards. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify, I think you're talking new construction only, no retrofitting of existing buildings for residential structures.
Correct.
Okay.
With potentially one caveat as it gets into if you're in new construction, could be any additions to those structures of a particular size, or if the roofing is to be replaced, if a percentage of the roof is being replaced, that it has to be brought up to a particular standard. So there is some kind of balance there, but appreciate that.
Thanks for the clarification.
So would that also happen if someone were selling an older home? And in part of the sale, we would require that they upgrade some bits?
I don't think so.
Well, that would be good.
I'll start by saying we could certainly explore that, but I think it maybe have some legal challenges with implementing that and requiring extensive level of improvements to a property or something to that extent. So that, do want to acknowledge the time and recognize that, that was the kind of the detailed aspect of the introduction, but really just want to give you an idea of what's what's on the books today, what's forthcoming, and what we may be exploring with this project. So within Sister City Code, we don't actually have any specific defensible space standards in our development code today, or any reference to building hardening. Now there are some strategies that can be inferred from fire safety, access, landscaping standards, etc. But there's opportunities there to really drill down and provide some detail as we're talking about today. What is in the code are aspects of our municipal code that speak to what's described as the urban-rural interface. I think that's an acknowledgement that we may be a little antiquated in our terminology. This code was most recently adopted in 2014. So we have some new understanding of strategies that can be employed, new terminology, even references to older mapping data, as well as state laws that have since been repealed. So there's an opportunity here to at the very least audit this section of the code. What this speaks to is areas of town that are identified on that map at the time as being extreme fire risk within the city limits. So those are only pockets or portions of the city that were this section of the code that was applicable to. And this would be the creation of fire and fuel breaks around structures and around different elements of a property, employing the similar strategies we already talked about, but more defined, unique standards to the time to reducing those fuels, ladder fuels, and other vegetative materials. Also included in that code was for all properties that a clear space is created on the property that's fuel free. That's cutting your grasses and other weeds or vegetation down to 4 inches and maintaining again those ladder fuels, or a reduction of those ladder fuels to reduce that fire risk. And as previously noted, there are specific provisions in the code prohibiting wood, shingle, and shake roofs. And then jumping to the upcoming and in process statewide standard. In 2020, the state legislature adopted Senate Bill 762 and updated with some timing elements. Most recently, this last session was Senate Bill 80. That required or put the wheels in motion of a statewide strategy to address wildfire hazards and mitigation. And it gave direction to particular state agencies to take action, one of which is, and much of this hinges on the adoption of a wildfire risk map that the Oregon Department of Forestry is currently developing. They initially issued, as we may be all familiar, a map for consideration that was swiftly withdrawn for further consideration and refinement and public outreach, and hasn't that subsequent map continues to be in development, and there is no timeline that I'm aware of for the release or implementation of that map today. And I think that's important to note as we have this conversation now. With the adoption of that mapping, it does put in the wheels in motion for the implementation and effective dates here locally for updated defensible space standards that the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office was directed to develop. They have prepared and issued those draft defensible space standards, and they're included in your packet today. And that kind of gives the kind of baseline best practices with respect to requirements on a statewide scale, employing many of the same strategies we've already kind of given the general overview to. Recognizing that that's a statewide implemented standard that was, again, intended to be applied statewide, that we may have some more specific standards or conditions that warrant localized considerations. And then lastly, the State Building Codes Division was directed to provide some updates to the residential specialty code that's implemented through the R327, that are those building hardening standards that we've been talking about. don't intend to dive into those details, but those are the statewide standards that are forthcoming at some time with the adoption of the map. So those will be applied here locally one way or another. It's just a matter of if those are our standards that we'd like to employ, or if we'd like to do something different or more restrictive or more detailed than what the state requires.
We can't go less restrictive.
I'm sorry, we cannot.
Just making sure.
And then lastly, there are many jurisdictions out there doing this work, and that there's opportunities to learn from those jurisdictions and see what's working there, what's not, and identify maybe what we can learn from that and adopt here locally. So one example that's highlighted and brought up regularly is the city of Ashland in Southern Oregon. They are, we'd call it the forefront of addressing wildfire hazards and mitigation on a very comprehensive scale, employing the development code, municipal code, elements of the fire department dedicated to addressing this issue on a regular basis. And so what they've done with their wildfire safety ordinance is taken a multi-tiered approach in addressing these standards. So we're not just looking at creating a defensible space or building hardening, but rather looking at other plant materials and species and how those landscaping materials are installed on a property and maintained, other construction elements such as fencing, really detailing that. But one of the major tools that they utilize and that I highlighted to you, Councilor Cobb, is they use fire prevention and control plans for many of the larger developments and the new development to really get a comprehensive approach to those properties and projects instead of looking at it on individual scales. With that said, there are standards for individual scale, individual lots that are applied under their code. So we could really look at that as a good guide to consider as we think about what we want to do here locally. And so that brings me to kind of the time to hear a little bit more from you. Recognize a limited amount of time, but noted in the meeting materials were some options that staff had highlighted as options for the council to consider. That being wait and see and what the state does when they do, and use that as a guidance and or dictate how we want to go. Other options being local adoption of the R327 building code standards. Built into that update that the building code division provided is a local adoption process that outlines how to implement and adopt these here locally, but also provisions that may go above and beyond what the code provisions allow or require, I should say. Similarly, we could adopt the state fire marshal's defensible space standards as written, or opportunity to refine. Option 4 being looking at kind of more broadly at what other strategies have been employed and look at those and as a collective that we could use here locally, or the all-encompassing other that may be identified by counselors or that we come across at a later date. So with that, here for any questions, but looking for those comments and thank you.
The OSFM draft defensible space standards, are those based on a region of the city, or are they a blanket?
Thank you for that. They are both the defensible space standards and building hardening standards are directly tied to the statewide wildfire risk map and would apply to only those high hazard areas. So we don't have that map for a reference at this point. So that could be that will be one of the considerations on how to apply any standards. If it's related to risk mapping or other mapping information, citywide, regions, or quadrants of the city. So,
You know, seeing the map that came out before and assuming the new map will be somewhat similar, it's hard for me to imagine a wildfire coming through this community and having any area of the community be particularly safer than any other area. And
Like it would only burn the high risk area of the city and not the other parts.
yeah, and
It would look for the buildings with explodey things.
you know, this house was, this wasn't, this was, you know, come on. So we are tied to that map, whether we want to be tied to it or not. When it comes out,
I don't think so.
we aren't.
No. No,
I-
we have opportunity to go be more restrictive or different from that map. I would say that we can't go less restrictive than
Right.
when the map
Okay.
comes out, but there could be similar to city of Ashland, their wildfire hazard map that they've adopted is the entirety of the city limits and urban growth boundary.
Right, okay, that's good to know because.
I-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we can, you know, have some discussions and go and I would defer to experts other than me to decide if this is the final step to make, but I'm kind of the opinion that if half the town is high risk, the whole town is high risk.
Mhm.
And I think that if we five kind of acknowledge that already as a group,
Mhm.
then we can kind of skip some of this. Hey, let's do this or let's do that. Let's kind of look at what's best for the whole city as a city. And we're not trying to pick on landowners that, you know, have a marsh. I can appreciate that there's going to be that a little bit, that there's going to be some properties that aren't themselves alone high risk. But if there's a building on there and the rest of the town's on fire, that building's at risk. Whether you have surrounded by a moat, marsh, sprinklers are on and all that. So
Yeah, Embers can travel like 2 miles.
Right.
Our town is 2 square miles.
yeah, we're only 1.88 square miles. So if you guys are all in agreement, I think that we can, you know, sisters, I talk about this a lot. The sisters way is a little different. I think we can almost default to some kind of standards that are not waiting for a map, not waiting for other standards. Let's set some standards for sisters.
Yeah, because we've been waiting.
And I think the longer we wait, the more construction we have, the more retro we have to kind of try to think about how to work with, the more dangerous it makes it for our fire department and our community. And so certainly the first page that you had up for options, I kind of went, nope. And, I think we really do need to think about it. And I'm gonna ask actually Carrie to print me out a copy of the Ashland material because it was very hard to read it on an iPad. But it had, for instance, lists of trees that were prohibited within the community because they're high fire risk trees. That may be something we want to look, this is an easy thing to do when looking at landscaping trees.
Junipers.
Yeah, don't get me going on those. But anyway, I think that I think we would be remiss in our duty by waiting for the state to do something.
And I think we didn't add this as a goal to punt it down 2 more years when or 10 years
Right.
when ODF finally gets some app together.
Punt it down the road to all the.
I mean, just we're not-
Council, so someone else
this-
has to do it.
This council's not that, not that way, right?
Right.
Do you agree with that? So I don't know how that fits in the 5 options.
At the same time, I think we do need to have a good idea of what properties this would impact as soon as we approved it. Because I don't, in the subdivision I'm in, there are a few vacant lots. They would look different than everybody else if they came in with the new standard.
Possibly.
They would, I know that.
Yeah.
So, I think we need to look at, do we want to fine tune? If you're building a house in a neighborhood that is an older neighborhood and looks very different, you are going to stand out. But of course, you may survive the fire.
And be the only one left.
You might be the warming shelter.
Right.
So I think it would be prudent to have an idea of exactly where the lots are that we would be putting under the new standard. I can understand it totally with a new development, but where you have individual lots in older neighborhoods, it might might feel a little bit different about that. I don't know.
I think though I would look at trying to do something that's citywide, like this, that, and then allowing an individual to come in when they're doing the planning process and attempt to, with the city, to look to do some mitigation in order to fit into the neighborhood. I still think you can build a home with defensible space, and you can build a home that's hardened and still have it look like it belongs in the neighborhood that it's in. You know, so I mean, it might not have wood cedar siding on it, which is a requirement of all the other houses in there, but you can get some cement board siding that looks 5 feet away, just like cedar siding. I mean, it's not all the 8-inch wide stuff that you see around. Some of it's quite a bit narrower.
Well, I guess I'd like to chime in that I think what we're going to be doing is two things. One is making modifications to development code just to make it clearer relative to hardening. And then we're also going to be looking at existing homes and dispensable space and, you know, not so much home hardening, you know, and we're not going to be requiring people to change the roofs, you know, all of a sudden, but rather if they're like 30% of it is gone, then they're going to need a new roof anyway, something like that. So what I'm thinking is an assessment of the areas that are highest at risk, you know, those with a lot of fire fuels, the areas aren't that clear, and maybe, you know, just counseling with those people once we do have our code for municipal, counseling with them, you know, because there are resources that the Oregon Fire Marshal provides to help with fire mitigation, cleaning your fuels, and we could, maybe the city could advocate for, you know, providing some financial assistance through those other organizations, not us ourselves, but,
Okay,
you know.
for the sake of time, go ahead.
time.
Yeah, and kind of feeding off of Counselor Cobb is the question for you two is, there are different parts to this. There's going to be big changes in development code. There's going to be big changes in municipal code. And there could be, you know, tertiary products like a tree list or vegetation list, you know, preferred vegetation list, something like that. So is there any knowledge or experience on, you know, this is a heavy lift. you know?
Big.
Is there any advice on do it all at once, start here, work your way this direction or that direction in your experience or research?
Or yeah.
Take care. I can.
Welcome your comments.
You know, we don't have a lot of experience within Deschutes County on it. We're planning to go to Ashland within the next couple of months and learn from their experiences. You know, I would say that from a fire protection standpoint, I think the comments related to doing something, getting the code in place before you add more housing that's at risk makes a lot of sense. So I think you're on the right track on, you know, developing or adopting a standard, a municipal code that could address that, because you don't want to add 400 homes to the community that now are at risk. And especially with increased densities, the closer we build homes together that don't have home hardening on them, it puts people even at greater risk. So I think the timing is right. And I don't know about the difference timing wise and staging that from a code perspective. I don't know, Matt, if you do on that piece.
I think we can look into a strategy and how to address each one of what our higher priorities are, and kind of start to chip away at what those different kind of higher priority, such as those that may apply to new development. No, and then perhaps the building hardening. I mean, recognizing perhaps as an example that building hardening is coming down the pike already. That maybe that can be a secondary, you know, for example. So what we can come back with is kind of, after doing some research, perhaps not that strategy, but the idea is like recognizing that this project is relatively large, and defining those priorities could be what it may take to work our way through the policy development and implementations. Come back with some more detail once we understand each of these a little bit better.
I would add, we're already training our staff to perform defensible space home assessments. We're providing that service on a voluntary basis today. The state fire marshal is training, going to train all of our career staff that are on duty. So every day we'll have somebody that's on duty that's certified and trained to do that. We see this, you know, in the future is certainly going to be a lot of work associated with that. We view it as an education first approach, as we do with most of fire codes that we enforce. Most people will want to protect their property. They'll want to do it, create the defensible space if they know what it is, and you provide them the tools to do it and the education. The vast majority of people will willingly do it. So.
Firewood off on the have a fight on that one.
Well, only so.
Yeah, and just a quick comment, what you were saying earlier, you probably saw my look at you when you said that, but I think that we need to, to me, the low hanging fruit under the development code is hardening. I think that doesn't require really looking at how the development's put together and those sorts of things. That is a longer and a higher lift, but I think waiting for the state to put out hardening standards is a mistake. I think we should start there with new development, and because that's our best case to try to start to improve. And a lot of that development is occurring around the perimeter of the community or will. And I think that helps us a little bit too with a fire hardened zone, which may make it a little bit better for the internal parts of our city where we have older structures that are highly flammable.
The hotel.
I live in one. And so I think that's kind of where I would see us starting, and also look at the municipal code and other things. But if I were going to look at one light lift, that get probably not really from your perspective, but from mine, would be to look at the building hardening standards and not wait for the state. And if we have to modify them when the state comes out because they got something more strict than ours, great, but I don't think they will.
I appreciate that counter. It's more of an effort to acknowledge that we could strategize and identify what the priorities and biggest impact could be.
And the R327 is actually a pretty decent set of rules already, right? I mean, would you be comfortable if that was something we adopted, for instance? I mean, not to have to reinvent the wheel, maybe.
At least it's a starting point, especially.
Yeah.
Yes, Counselor. It's been around for several years. Local governments and counties have had the option to adopt R327 for probably 4 or 5 years, potentially. So it's been in place for a long time. They're updating it a little bit, is my understanding, but it's a solid building code.
Okay, and we're definitely not throwing out defensible space by any means either. So let's make sure that that's clear. So I think that we're just going to have more conversations about what exact direction we're heading, and I think some of those may be behind the scenes a little bit, but at the same time, you know, we're going to be looking to move a lot of this forward for next year. And I'll repeat what I said. We didn't make this as a goal to sit on it. So it wasn't just to placate people about fire mitigation. This is about actually getting something done and doing what's right. So.
And I mean, it would be good if we had most of it in place as far as code goes before spring, you know?
Well, I don't
Before fire
know.
Season.
I mean,
Well, buildings is.
yeah,
I'm not talking about new building codes. I'm talking about municipal for the.
Defensible space.
Thank you. Defense.
so we gave them a goal for this fiscal year, and we're, you know, I can't expect them to say, hey, have it done by March 1. I don't, you know, it's probably not a lift we can do anyway, but we can certainly keep working on it and try and get it done in the time frame that we thought, which is this fiscal year. Is that fair enough?
And did you
City
get what
manager?
you needed from us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
this is,
Yeah.
appreciate your time and your input today and the additional time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to call to order the regular city council meeting. It is 6:47 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Preden,
I'm here.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Counselor Letts,
Here.
Counselor Ross,
Present.
Counselor Cobb.
Here,
I'll be looking for an approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
second,
We have a motion and we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
What's next? Visitor communication. What do we have, Carrie?
Boris. State your name and your,
Hi, my name is Boris Tkach. I live at 914 East Horseback Trail here in Sisters. And before moving here, I retired from the U.S. Forest Service, where I spent 38 years as a forest pathologist. I was also the National Program Manager for Forest Health Monitoring for the country, lived all over the country. And for a time served as a chair for the Tree Commission in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, when I was stationed in DC. And I'd like to just stand here in support of the ordinance that you're considering to extend the ordinance to tree removals on private lands. I support that. And I think it's very important to try to maintain the tree cover that we do have. As we all know, trees provide a lot of benefits to us environmentally in terms of climate change, carbon sequestration, air pollution, amelioration, but also to public health and human health. A lot of research now shows the benefits of trees and natural environments to human health, especially in some cities. So whatever we can do to maintain the beautiful trees that we have, the significant trees, regardless of ownership, I support. And so I really I'm glad to see that that's before the council. I do support that. I've been in communication with Scott Woodford about a few issues, not with the language that you currently have, but perhaps to consider. There's talk about the requirement to use certified arborists without actually defining what that is. And so it would be good to perhaps include the fact that the certification for arborists is very specific. That's done by the Society of Arboriculture, International Society of Arboriculture, and they have different levels of certification. Basic tree care is the first level, but if you're talking about doing tree risk assessments that are called for in your ordinance to remove trees that pose risk to human, to life, property, or other risks, that takes a higher level of knowledge and certification to identify hazardous trees and potential targets. And so I would encourage you to consider that as you're refining these ordinances over time. So thank you for your time. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Michael?
Well,
Welcome, Michael.
I just scribbled this and was going to comment on a woman on this who is a child, adolescent, and adult psychotherapist, specialized divorce, loss, and chronic illness, who was about Rosalind Carter's age and had a whole different perspective on what's going on. And when I talked to her before she died, she knew how screwed over these people. She knew they were screwing me over. But I'm not going to read it because you know why. And Rosalind Carter did know about the stigmatization of people in the mental health system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I know it more deeply than her too. So
Thanks, Michael.
Xenia?
Hi, my name is Zenya Kuzma, 914 East Horseback Trail, and I'm on the STR bandwagon again. I don't think we're moving fast enough on STRs. 20% of our land is taken up by vacant houses and STRs most of the time. And if we're considering the 260 acres on the urban growth boundary, we need to figure out that 20%. Is it going to impact that increased boundary? And if it is, you can take 20% off of 260 and lower the urban growth boundary to 200. I think we're moving way too slow on STRs. Every other city of our caliber and our population who's a tourist town has already acted. You could look across the nation, look at every town between 3,000 and 25,000 that's in a beautiful place, and they've already acted. And so we need to really cap those STRs because they're going to impact the urban growth boundary. And you have this water table. It's out in the front. It's a really good resource. Thank you for putting it out. But we do have a water table issue, and we do have to look at that. We're in Central Oregon, and when you're looking at urban growth boundaries, you have to look at water tables and resources. Don't know what's going to happen with our charter because it allows us to vote on annexation, and yet I'm told it's legislated. So there goes our democratic process. I'm worried about that. I really am. Plus, we're not really including that may change. OPB did a special on water tables and how they may change how we do urban growth boundaries. Please look at that OPB. It's talking about water and Central Oregon. And so that might happen before we decide to add 260 acres. But the STR issue is not legislated. That is in your purview. That's where you have power, agency. And I think if you look at that, you'll open up more housing possibilities. You have to look at trust too. Last time the public was told that there would be affordable housing was Woodlands. Okay, that did not wind up being affordable. Matter of fact, it is the most expensive square footage in the city, $550 to $600 a square foot. And there are no real families moving there. The family does not want a 2-bedroom house with no yard. And so if you look at the public and kind of say, oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about, you have to understand that was just 2 years ago. And that's what they were told. And that's what they have seen. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of convincing. And I also think that we do have resources that are irreplaceable in terms of wildlife when that happens. As far as North Plains goes, that was mentioned last time, they are very active and they may win. My son lives near North Plains where they have a referendum where they want to vote on their annexation. So the STRs is the only card that we have in addressing the acreage being lessened. So please play it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all who commented. We appreciate it. Next up is the consent agenda. Oh, there's nobody online.
Nobody online has to sign up ahead of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Consent agenda, could probably use a motion on that. There's no change to it.
I move to accept the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. First up on council business is ordinance 534. This is an ordinance amending the City of Sisters Municipal Code to add chapter 9.30 requiring a permit for tree removal on a private property. I'm going to open the public hearing. Public hearing is now open. Time for staff comments and report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Scott Woodford, Community Development Director, with Jacob Smith, our Code Enforcement Officer. And we're here to present to you tonight an amendment to the municipal code to add a new chapter 9.30 for tree removal. Jacob will run you through the elements of the ordinance, but I just wanted to kind of preface it by saying that this is not a new process for the community. This is something that we already administer. We've been administering through our development code previously for as many years as I have been here, and I'm sure it has been done so before that as well. But we did recognize that the more appropriate location for this process would be the municipal code because as it's noted, development code is really to regulate development. And so we felt that, and we do have tree standards that will continue to regulate development, but we felt that this was more appropriately located in the municipal code so it could address existing homes, existing property owners who request to remove trees. So it's not a new process, but we did take the liberty to make some tweaks to the criteria and to the process to make it better, we think, and to add some different review criteria and potentially even add some flexibility to homeowners where there wasn't before in terms of utilizing it to make way for certain improvements should that be the only spot on their lot that they could do it in. So I'll turn it over to Jacob, and Jacob will kind of take you through the specifics of the proposed ordinance. So go ahead, Jacob.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, Scott summarized the intent of the code is to kind of continue to operate as we have been as far as tree removals, but getting it over into the municipal code. The main criteria of the code is requiring a permit to remove a significant tree on private property. If you look up in definitions, we have the definition of a significant tree, which is diameter 8 inches or greater at 4.5 feet above the ground. We took this code from the same part of the development code that we would use for developing lots. That is the same trees we'd be protecting during that development stage. We thought it was important to keep those numbers the same for consistency across the city. The code starts out at 93020 with that permit requirement. Some exceptions for the permit. Number one is public trees. We have a specific code section that regulates their removal. We have a defensible space code that we've spoke about earlier. That is anything that requires tree removal in that code or the updated code coming here in the future wouldn't require a permit or this specific permit. As stated before, we have a code in place in our development code for developing properties. A permit will not be required for tree removals on there. And lastly, we will not require the permit for an immediate threat of a tree. Say a big storm comes through, trees hanging over a house or a car, and they need to take care of it at that moment. There wouldn't be a requirement for that permit. They would need to contact us about why that happened and the reasons behind it. The requirements of the permit would be a fee that is established by city council, so it could be nothing. You guys get to choose that, obviously. We'd also require some information about the property, the location of the tree being removed, other factors, property lines, and structures. A big part of the code is getting an arborist to say why the tree needs to be removed, and the justification for that under the approval criteria that we'll go over here shortly. We want to know if they considered alternatives, and then we also want the information of the arborist. The approval criteria that we'll be using is 4 different criteria. The first one is disease trees we want removed. We want, or we will allow the removal of compromised trees or hazardous trees. So a lot of those are the same. Scott spoke about allowing more flexibility for tree removal. So we do have that, the 4th
approval criteria, which allows the removal for construction improvements. With a caveat that it needs to be reasonable. We added a little portion of the code that we can speak to the city forester if some of this information doesn't seem right, or we would like more information regarding these trees. And finally, the violation portion of the code, it's slightly different than a continuing nuisance like code enforcement has to deal with most of the time. If a tree was removed without the permit, we could issue a fine from $500 up to $2,000 for the unpermitted removal of a significant private property tree. So I went through that semi-fast, and if you have any questions, obviously I can take those now.
We're not at the question stage yet, but
Excuse me.
yeah, no, it's okay. There's things we have to do in a public hearing first. One of the things I'm supposed to ask you, is there revisions from the posted ordinance, or is this exactly presented as is?
As presented.
Okay, thank you. All right, before we get to questions, we do have to have a period of public comments. If anybody wants to make a public comment on this particular item, now is the time.
If you'd like to come up to the podium, please.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Therese Kohler, 1190 Jansen Court Sisters. And just for public information, I am on the Urban Forestry Board, but I am making this comment as a private citizen. So I do concur that we definitely would improve the ease of the city dealing with people with private property removing trees or wanting to remove trees, to put this in the municipal code. I concur with the earlier speaker that it would be great if we could specify what a certified arborist is and write it out in the code. Because as I've heard about these kind of situations, a common thing I hear is that, well, you know, you can get an arborist to say pretty much whatever you want them to say to justify taking down a tree. So I would imagine that the more educated and professional the arborist level of expertise is, the more integrity they would have about that. And lastly, I don't know if you're all aware, but a very large ponderosa was taken down from Sisters Woodlands. I don't know, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, that it's on a development, so it's not analogous to this, but it was a huge ponderosa, 48 inches at the base. I went there and found a chunk of it. I'm sorry, but it does really bother me that this tree came down. The chunk I found, which was like a wedge of the tree, was 42 inches. It's gone. Cannot be replaced at any cost. So, and I'm sure that all of us agree that this is a loss to the city, a tremendous loss. It was visible on Pine Street as you're driving down, no longer. So my point in bringing this up is that $2,000 to take down a tree that is a beautiful, precious tree for all of the city, whether it's on a private property or public property, I think is not enough. I don't know what the number is, but a $2,000 fine is pretty insignificant to somebody who has some money and who just wants to get that tree down. So it may be too late for this round of this code, but I hope that the penalty could be raised significantly, or put a clause in there that say it's a tree by tree assessment. A tree appraisal is a term that's used to decide what the value of a tree was, and it could be not just its value as lumber, but its value as a cultural asset and part of our tree canopy. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anybody online would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. I see none.
All right. I'm going to close the public portion.
Saddlestone. And thank God the city did make it a significant tree. It was a letter writing campaign before I lived there.
You have to put your name and your address first.
Oh, Xenia Kuzma, 914 East Horseback Trail at Saddlestone. And this was about 4 years ago, and it was an enormous tree. It's still there. It's gorgeous. It's healthy. But across the way, twin tree, just as big, was also looked at to save. And all they had to do was flip the plan for the house. They had to put the driveway on the other side and the tree would have been saved. The issue with that was then the people buying the house wanted the city to indemnify the tree. Okay, so that's the trick, you know, that the developers use. And of course, the city could not indemnify the tree and it was taken down. But what people don't know is it was taken down at night and subsequently, and this is, people don't have any knowledge of this, the house was built and the house slumped and the developer was sued. Okay, this same developer is building out by the high school. Okay, this same developer, when he saw the significant tree saved right by my house, the one that's still standing, told me, oh, it's easy. I'll just ruin the roots and it'll die. He said this to our face in a group. So what I'd like to propose is not only your ordinance have a certified arborist, but that somebody goes on site when they do some work of a significant tree of that large size, 500 years old, ancient, not diseased, that they see what the developer is doing to the tree in terms of their bulldozing, how close, how the roots are being handled. So in some ways you need an enforcer as well to look at it. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. We're going to close the public portion of the hearing. Now we can ask questions and deliberate. So you have questions of staff?
So I did suggest that if someone has an emergency situation where they have to remove a tree, and then we say that they have to notify us, I suggested that we have some kind of time limit in there, whether it's 48 hours, 78 hours, whatever it is, and that if they don't notify us, they too should be fined. Because we're having a fine for people that remove trees when they're not supposed to. But if someone says we have an emergency after the fact, or don't even tell us, I mean, there's no follow-up on that. So I'm just concerned about that. I also agree that we should make clear, this was news to me tonight. I agree with this couple of speakers that we should make clear the arborist level. You know, that should be a requirement. And I'm kind of shocked about the woodlands tree. That sounds awful. I'm done.
Okay.
A question actually for planning. I believe the tree that was taken down in Woodlands was a tree designated to be retained.
Correct.
And yet we have no recourse to do anything about it after the fact. Because it's part of the development. And so I think we need also to consider how, and I'm sure you are thinking about this, but how does the development and put that deal with it when a builder or a homeowner requires that in order to build, I need to have that taken down. What is our recourse to
Save the tree.
well, the tree's gone. So what's our recourse when that tree is gone without permission? It's a designated tree to retain as part of the building, the plat of the property. So what do we have as a recourse when that occurs?
So we treated that one as a violation of their approval, a violation of their development approval. And we did levy a fine on that one, as high as we could, I think as high as we could do that the code allows. Not probably enough given the size of the tree and, but that's the max of what we had in the code to be able to, use as a punitive kind of,
What was that, Max?
what was it?
500.
500,
So
yeah,
that's a number we should look at increasing as well, I believe.
yeah.
If we're looking at this on private property, it should at least be equal or greater on.
Yes. Well, I think it's proposing a range.
Yeah.
And
That-
I think
the
that
tree
it's,
was-
it's good to have
Yeah,
a
well, yeah,
range because the circumstances can be entirely different.
but in this case, the max they could do was.
Right, because
Yeah.
it's the existing code.
Right. And so, that was my understanding and I wanted to be sure that I could in there. I think if we're gonna allow the emergency removal, we need to have photographic evidence that the tree was indeed, a hazard presented. In other words, you mentioned, there's a storm comes through, a tree breaks off, a limb breaks off. Of course you want to get rid of it. Not that hard with cell phones and everything else, take a picture and provide that to the city to show that it wasn't, an opportunistic removal as opposed to a necessary removal.
I had to move it, remove it in the middle of the night.
It was
It
next
fell
in, it
down.
was next in my explosion.
Now, how is that dealt with now? Do we just take their word for it?
We don't, have a provision in our code for that scenario now, as far as I know. Yeah.
I don't think we did.
So we're creating this.
Right.
And a second comment is that I'm, as a representative of the forestry board, this was discussed at length more than once at the urban forestry board meetings. There was a lot of back and forth. A couple of the board members believed it was a private property issue and that we should not get in the middle of it. But other members of the urban forestry board felt indeed, if we are going to protect the canopy in our community, we do need to have some ability to know the tree is coming down, hence the permit, and ability to address someone who does it without going through any kind of a process. So that's kind of what that group was, knowing that they really don't have a say in it because they deal with the city-owned trees, but there was a great degree of discussion. And I think there was a thin majority was in favor of this recommendation. Those opposed were not, we're seeing it more as I should be able to do on my property what I want to do on my property kind of an issue. And we hear that. Jennifer, do you have anything?
Yeah,
Deliberations? Sorry,
Yes,
those questions.
that's fine.
I too had a problem. It was more a problem with the arborist or forester. Because those are two different things. I mean, I know they both deal with trees, but those are two different job descriptions. So, I think, specifying, a certification level with an arborist would be useful for everybody involved, property owner and the city. I think the form should be, whatever the form ends up looking like should be simple to use, easy for citizens to use. I don't think there should be a fee.
Agree.
At this point, I don't feel like, I think, we're already dealing with tree issues already. So, I mean, if there's a significant increase in that and workload, then we can come back and revisit that. I don't want to burden any citizens more than they need to be in this process. It'd be nice if in that form, this is just a suggestion in the form, because they have to provide you a map. It'd be nice to, go on dial and just print out a map of their tax lot. So at least they have that as a template, of what their lot looks like, and they can scribble away on that. There was one section in here where, DBH is referred to, but I don't think DBH was ever spelled out as diameter breast height. So that's just a quick fix. And
But we use diameter at 4.5 feet, so we don't really have to use.
but it is
But it's
DBH
DBH in the code.
but it's not described as what that stands for. So either remove it or just
Spell it out.
spell it out. And I have a little, and this isn't gonna stop me from anything, but just the, significance of tree, and I know that we use this, the DBH and the 8-inch. I just want to make sure, I haven't gone out and measured every tree in town, but we have a tendency to use that as with our really common trees like ponderosas and junipers and things like that. But there's certainly a lot of significant trees in town. They're more on the historic side. There's like a lot of 100-year-old apple trees and then fruit trees, things like that, which, can be more demure in size. I mean, I think for the most part, you're going to find that they're bigger than 8 inches, but I just want to make sure that we're not, leaving out, leaving a loophole for, trees that are significant, just kind of fall out of the normal trees that we're thinking about. Those are the trees I think are really fascinating in the city to, that show part of the history of the community and the settlement. So, and then I think in this process, just to clarify, is this something that if somebody does pull a permit, are you going to do a site visit beforehand, or are we just, all that's going to be handled by the applicant and we're just, unless somebody comes and complains about it, then we go out?
Typically, the practice is once we get a request, we actually go out and take a look at it. To just do some kind of see it for our own eyes to make sure that what they show on the map coordinates to or corresponds to what is there on the site, and to just for our own level of expertise verify kind of that, oh yeah, that looks like a dead tree, or in addition to their arborist report.
That tree isn't on your property.
Yeah, that tree is on that. Yeah, to make sure it's on your property and not a public tree.
Yeah,
you know.
Verification.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. And then I'll just agree with counselors before me that I think the penalty needs to be higher and, across the board. I mean, I know the penalty for taking a public tree is pretty high. I mean, that was right. That was levied a few years ago. So I know we have a lot of wiggle room between those two, and it's a little odd to have it.
So is anybody proposing we change the language of the ordinance before we pass it tonight? Is that what I hear?
Well, I think we're saying that we want a greater fine range.
Well, no.
Some people do.
I'm not in favor
That's what
of
I'm,
that.
that's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that if somebody's requesting that we change the language, that we have a majority of council that wants to do that. And that's what you're actually proposing. I mean, I understand what you guys are saying. You're talking about what you want, but we have to kind of be clear here about, is that actually going to change what we're voting on tonight?
That's a good point.
Just to make sure we're kind of clarifying everybody's direction.
I think that in fairness, that we kind of got distracted by my question about how much did it cost for the tree on the development. We're really talking about private property at this point in time and what we want to do.
Right, we're not talking about.
I think the numbers that are in here are fine as in this proposal, but I do think after listening to the presentation of the gentleman in the back, I wonder if we do need to be a little bit clear about what that term arborist means.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need a certain level of certification? I didn't know there was more than one level of certification.
Right.
And
Then we'd have to decide which level was appropriate.
Yeah, let me take control of that if I could.
Yeah.
What's in there about arborists? Is there a definition? I don't have my thing connected, so I don't have the packet in front of me.
It just says, there's a reference to tree report prepared by certified arborist. It doesn't go on to further define what that. Forester, we kind of use the term, we have a definition of city forester, and it does refer to that the term city forester and city arborist are interchangeable. So we don't have anything in there right now that would say specify what kind of certification you need.
Can we modify,
we
modify the definition?
Well, I think certified arborist is somewhat particular, but obviously that might be to interpretation depending on the one commenter about, basically tree inspector, or, it was like a step below that. I don't know how we changed that definition today. Does that make sense? I think that's hard to do.
Well, we could just add the word appropriately qualified arborist.
That's watered down.
That waters it down.
That's actually watered down. So one concern I have, and I just want to bring this up because I think it's really important, is there's a lot of people out there that can barely afford what they have, and even hiring an arborist or even somebody to come on site. And it's a question I think that has been brought up before is, what is it about somebody who might need a tree inspected but can't afford an arborist? are they able to come to the city and say, hey, can you have the forester come out or have a staff member come out and inspect it? And would that be an appropriate thing?
We've never had that request in my experience. It's never been, we've not gotten negative feedback for, in most cases, the request for an arborist, because I think a lot of times it's, when they're getting a professional tree service to take down the tree, I think it's kind of, sometimes that's a service that they offer.
Okay.
We do have a city forester on staff and we do, from time to time, bring him into the picture to get his opinion when there might be some level of doubt or it's not as clear as it could be. So I'm sure that we could, if we got a request like that, engage our city forester for that use.
And would you say that it would be also fair to say that if we use the phrase certified arborist and some question, comes up about possibly their actual certification, that having the city forester as a backup and staff as a backup is probably okay for now without having to rewrite all of the language?
Yeah.
And defining what exactly a certified arborist is. I mean, we could require that we have arborists sign up with the city to be certified and have a list of certified arborists that work within Sisters. And maybe down the road, we could do that, something like that. But I mean, do you think we've opened up ourselves by just having certified arborists in any way? Or do you think that this is enough to get this on the books for our get this private tree ordinance going? And then if we have to refine it down the road, if we see an issue, do you think that that's probably okay?
That's our opinion. I mean, we do respect and appreciate the comments from the public for bringing this issue up. So it caused us to do kind of a little bit of education on our own part to see how many different types of certification organizations are out there, and really there appears to be primarily just one that is kind of the industry standard. So if you call yourself certified, it's usually through the everything. Every time we Googled it, popped up. It was the International Society of Arboriculture, the ISA, which I think the gentleman was referring to. So I'm not sure that we didn't see a whole lot of other competing certification organizations out there.
So if we said ISA certified arborist, that wouldn't really limit the field?
No, and if another organization came along, I guess we could amend the code at that time. I guess the point I was trying to make is that certified arborist is pretty much means one thing, and that's certified by the ISA.
Well, and I also feel like if you feel like, well, there's a bunch of renegade arborists running around, taking money under the table in order to certify removal of trees.
They're saying there are.
Well, the street tree that was taken down and dropped in the middle of the street was done by somebody who guy called in, get in from out of town, never asked a soul what to do, took the tree down. We didn't know it was
But
happening.
did he say, I'm a certified arborist and I've been?
Well, that was on public property.
That was on public property, but the point I make is that I think it's the ISA certified, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I am
It's-
too. I mean.
It's an easy change.
That's an easy change.
If that's what it takes.
I mean,
Um,
it still doesn't say level, but
But I just,
closer.
I just would go with that, ISA certified, and then can that be a done here and still approve this ordinance?
yeah,
Does it have to
with
go
that
back?
modification.
I think
could
that
make
the
that amendment.
speaker mentioned that, ISA certified arborist is a different level than some of the lower levels that ISA also has.
Right, but it's
No,
closer.
No, it was ISA does all the certification, but
There's other
there's
people that.
other layers.
Okay.
There's,
Yeah.
level
Within
A,
that.
level B, level
Okay.
C,
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. It's just too late.
Yeah.
Thank you though.
Public hearings closed, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
How many people want to talk about changing the fine? I'm fine the way it is.
Did Counselor Blum, did you get to ask your question?
No,
and
I didn't
comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I was just trying to narrow down
Yeah,
the
no.
conversation. sorry.
I was hesitant on this because I am one of those people that look at Well, if I want to take my tree out, why do I have to go through all of these hoops? It's an ugly tree. It's bent over. I don't like it. It's a fire hazard. I want to take it out. By the same token, that is not what all the trees are. There's lots of trees that deserve to be saved, and it's important. So I've been balancing what I feel about private property rights and what I feel about community good. And I feel that in all things, I have found that Sisters City staff have always been flexible and empathetic to the individual situation and people that they encounter. And I want to have this code allow for that, to be able to look at each situation, and if there is a funding issue, if there is a questionable arborist, if there is, any of those things that our people would look at that and say, what can we do to make that right? And take the spirit of what we're intending to do and make it work. That's the Sisters way. And I found that to always be the way that our staff works. So I feel comfortable imposing what I consider a little bit onerous situation, although I recognize it is something that's already being done, because I feel comfortable with the way I know it's going to be implemented. I don't agree with raising the penalty because I don't think there's too many private existing property owners that are going to run down, cutting down trees saying $2,000 here, $2,000 there. I don't really care. If it's a developer, yeah, that might, if I can put another house in there because I've cut down this tree, yeah, that might be worth it to me. But I don't see that as, and I don't see that our folks have an adequate range to be able to deal with the significance of the problem. So I like the funding, the penalty the way it is.
Ordinance as is, except the IPA.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, if we get along.
You know where my mind's at.
So when you say penalty is, you mean the 500 to 2,000 range?
Yeah, that's what's in the ordinance.
Okay. I didn't talk about how I feel about it either, but I'm with you about the private property stuff. I really struggled with that as I had conversations with Scott, and same thing. You said my words perfectly, so I'm good with the ordinance the way it is with the that little addition. Okay. That's it.
And this was because this discussion we just had with the five of us was not that different from what the members of the forestry board had sitting around the table on this same thing.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
That's
Yeah,
good
pretty
to know.
close,
Okay.
yeah.
So you guys three have to decide if you guys want to change the range of penalties.
I'm fine with the penalty the way it is.
Okay, that's three of us, so. Well, I mean, that's what deliberations are all about, right? I mean, here's the thing, here's the one thing I think is really important, and this goes to the public as well. I really want the public to hear this, is we don't have this code in municipal code, and now we will. And even if we have to adjust it a year or two from now, that's better than not having it at all.
Right.
So I think that we're taking a huge step in the right direction. Is there any other point that we wanted to discuss?
And I think that if staff finds that there are just folks out there butchering down trees faster than you can count them, and we need to boost the penalty because as a deterrent, I would definitely hear that because that would be a good reason to do it.
Right.
Yeah. So I would like to leave it up to the experience. And right now there hasn't been a real lot of.
And unlike 2 years ago, we have a code
Yeah,
compliance officer to kind of.
We've got some muscle on
We,
this.
I don't know if you know, but we have entrusted you to do this, and this is a lot of it's fallen on you. I mean, I know the rest of staff are all involved as well, but.
Just don't get treated.
Yeah,
Well,
so.
What I would like to suggest that we also table the idea for another meeting to put into the development code a larger range for tree removal.
Were we planning on visiting that?
I'm sorry.
Are we planning on visiting that, or is that part, that's not part of this ordinance?
No, it's not part of this ordinance.
So,
No.
And
I just want to,
or in the
I want to
fee
put it
schedule.
as something that we
even
might
be
do.
in The fee schedule.
yeah,
It's not-
I
yeah.
don't know. And goal setting is coming up, so.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I'm fine with, as I said, with the fee. And I think it's important to remember that this, what the permit does is let us know that something is being taken down on a piece of property. Something we already asked the public to do. And most of the times they come in, they talk to Emmy and Emmy kind of goes out and looks at it and, not always. But the permit I'm not supporting any kind of a fee for the permit. I think that is not what we're talking about. We're really talking about having the individual come and have a discussion with the city about why the tree is being removed. And so we have a little bit better understanding. And for 99% of our population, the penalty is not going to even come into play.
Okay, so for my 2 cents,
Oh, no.
no permit fee.
Okay.
Keep the fine as it is.
Okay.
And that slight modification to,
IPA.
IPA.
And
Yeah.
The first two are already in the ordinance. They're
Yeah.
not changes.
Right.
I know.
Oh, okay, well, you're
I'm just
marking those
confirming.
off like they were.
You said if you
change-
wanted to
changes.
change the range, you could. I'm just confirming.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I just,
So-
You guys.
it doesn't need to be part of the motion.
So
Alrighty.
if, it sounds like we're all on the same page.
I have one more thing to
Okay,
say.
sorry, go ahead.
I would like to see the penalty range higher. I know I'm in the minority, but I'll just say it. Because again, it's a range, it doesn't have to be the maximum, because I'm trying to think of different scenarios. There are people who own large parcels, private property owners in town. Think of, commercial properties, for instance. There's people who own multiple small lots around town. So there are people with deep pockets that could, not be bothered by a couple $1,000s. So I'm really trying to think in a big picture, but I know I'm on the minority of this, but I just wanted to point that out. And as this process always is, it's, opens up a Pandora's box of, things we need to fix and others. So like Counselor Cobb said, I'd love to revisit that development code side of this.
Me too.
And then the other thing is a reminder of our discussion earlier, the tree, one of the caveats exemptions is that, you can remove a tree if there is some sort of, urban, interface threat, wildfire threat of the tree. And, takes you to code 8.20, which we know is kind of, so it's just kind of,
Technical term.
it's a very chicken and egg thing right now, but it's just.
Explodey things.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. There's lots of exploding things in town, so. I'm just verbalizing again the, urgency, another reason to kind of keep moving with the fire code, because these two are tied together.
Yeah.
And they're only as strong as the code that they're tied to. So.
The question, since this is a municipal, it moves out in here, if the fee amount or fine amount, excuse me, were deemed need to be changed, it doesn't have to go through a whole public hearing again, does it? Or does it, if it's in the municipal code?
If it's specified in the code, if you want to change it, then it would have to
Okay,
be modified.
just, that was a curiosity question.
Can't just change it in the fee ordinance.
No.
So right now it's 500 to 2,000. I mean, we could make it 500 to 5,000
Or not.
or not, but. I mean, it's
I'm not gonna die on that stump.
I know.
Um,
That's why I was.
But I'm saying that there are, we gotta still, I totally get it. I think 99% of the time, it's right, like a $2,000 fee would be huge and.
That would hurt me.
Yeah, me too. The majority of our homeowners, but property owners, but there are some large properties in town and there's some.
Well, that's
people who
where the
own
range.
multiple properties that can afford $2,000 if they, didn't like that tree dropping sap on their car, so.
Especially if it's in the street.
All right. Well, so I guess we're.
So I think that if what I heard is right, there could be a motion and the only change is the certified arborist additional acronym in front of it.
Where would we put the amendment in this?
In the final motion.
In the final motion, not the reading of the title.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you also want to add the spelled out of the DBH?
Yeah, it's under significant tree.
Yeah.
Is that a Scrivener?
That's yeah, that does not need
Yeah.
to be called out in the amendment.
Okay.
Um,
All right, we could
so the-
probably have a motion to read,
Well, the first thing
We
is,
have-
yeah, I have
We
a
have to have
motion.
the motion read first.
to read by title only.
Yeah, I move to have the city manager read order number 534 by title only.
Second.
Well, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor to be read by title only, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Looking forward to hearing him do it.
This is ordinance number 534, right?
Mhm.
Ordinance amending the City of Sisters Municipal Code to add chapter 9.30, requiring a permit for tree removal on private property.
All right. So we would need a motion to approve and adopt the ordinance with.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 534 with the following change, which is to refer to it as a, you got me saying it.
What's the acronym?
ISA certified arborist.
Thank you.
Second.
I almost had a beer.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Vote by roll call.
Mayor Braden,
Aye.
Council President Plum,
Aye.
Councilor Letts,
Aye.
Councilor Ross.
Aye.
Councilor Cobb.
Aye.
Motion carries.
See what you did, Michael?
Sorry.
Just couldn't get that out of my head.
I don't even like IPA. That's the weird thing. So, all right. Second item, Scott, don't go nowhere. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jacob.
All right, UGB amendment process. Here we go. There's your staff report.
Yep, I'm your staff reporter.
Thank you.
So this is a request for a formal motion from council to direct staff to commence the process of an urban growth boundary amendment through the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. Just a little bit of background. The city recently updated its urban growth boundary sufficiency analysis, which revised its housing and employment projections based on new population projections received for the 20 years into the future, as well as an updated buildable lands inventory to look at what our capacity is to take on the projected development in the future. It also estimated future land uses for needs for other uses, including schools, utilities, parks, facilities, and public facilities. The conclusion of that report was that the existing boundaries did not have enough capacity to meet the projected demand in the future, and will need between 206 and 256 acres of additional land in an expanded urban growth boundary. Oregon revised statutes say if you have an amount of buildable residential land less than the amount of land needed for residential development, says the city must expand the UGB to provide the amount of land needed. It also says the same thing with respect to employment lands. So we reviewed the results of the report at a joint meeting with the Planning Commission back in October, and then again met with council at a work session on November 8th. And at that time, the direction was from the council to staff to start that process, which would be could be a 1 to potentially 2 year process that would be done in accordance with the state guidelines for expanding an urban growth boundary, and also be plenty of opportunities for community involvement. In fact, we would probably go above and beyond what is required for public notice and public involvement in the process, so that the community had an opportunity to provide their input. So what we're looking for, last time we got kind of the head nod that this was the direction that made sense to go in, given the results of that study and the needs of the community in the future. And so we felt it was just necessary of something of this importance that council make a formal motion to direct staff if they still feel that that's the direction that they want staff to go into. So We've talked about this several times, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about it. But looking for a motion from council tonight.
Okay. So you just threw it at us, huh? Thanks. Appreciate that. No. We've been talking about this a long time and, the one thing I wanted to remind people is this is something that is in our comprehensive plan that we wrote. We started that process in 2020 and it was finished in 2021. Our population at that time was around 3,000, 3,100, and we're at 3,700 just 2 years later. We're running out of room. I know it's a contentious issue about growth, but if you don't at least plan for it, whether you actually grow or not is a different process. That's annexation. This is planning for growth that's required by land use law that was put into effect 40 years ago, 50 years ago. We've been discussing this. It's not really that fun, to be honest with you. It's not super popular, but it's something that we should do. The five of us up here are tasked with strategic planning for the city. Our most important thing is public safety, but our second most important thing is strategic planning. And honestly, if the town grew to 7,000 in 20 years and we didn't get any bigger, our public safety would not be better. Traffic would be worse, pedestrian would be worse. It would just be bad. So I'm highly supportive of this, going through this process. I will say again that I think that it is beholden to us to have a huge public process and make sure everybody's engaged on this while we're doing this. This is a conversation that we should all be having with our constituents across the city in private conversations, but I also think that we need to continue to do a lot of public outreach and make sure everybody knows what we're doing. Does anybody have any statements or questions they want to say?
Just a quick statement. We're one of the few cities in the state of Oregon whose city limits are actually the urban growth boundary. Most cities in this state have an urban growth boundary that is somewhat significantly larger than they are. And that allows them, when necessary, to look to bring a certain amount of land, typically fairly small amount in, for the purposes of development and or industry. So what we're looking at doing here is something that I'm not overly thrilled about, but it's also something that I realize that we need to do. And frankly, if we don't do it, someone in Salem's going to decide what it's going to be for us. I'd rather we do it and we do it right. And when we do it, you're going to hear us use a number that sounds big, but that's because you go through this process, you identify the land. It doesn't mean you're going to bring any of it in. It doesn't mean you're going to bring all of it in. It might be you're just going to bring part of it in. But if you're going to go through it, you might as well identify the land that you're going to need beyond even the next 20 years. Because, like I said, we're one of the few cities that doesn't have a reserve of property that they can utilize for the city's needs and for citizens. One of the very few, maybe the only one, I don't know, but that's very unusual. And so I'm in favor of this. I'm trying to be realistic. We aren't going to meet some of the housing goals that we have. We don't have some more land. We aren't going to meet the parks goals that we have if we don't have some more land. We aren't going to meet the needs of our community, safety-wise, etc., if we don't have more land. Hate to say it. The trick is you got to trust the city, you got to trust the citizens that we're going to do it right. And when land comes in, we're going to do it in the right way. That's all you can do.
I ditto that for sure. We need to look at what our needs are going to be for the future, because we've just grown into our urban growth boundary. We've annexed what was in it and expanded it and filled it up much quicker than anybody ever imagined it was going to fill up. And so when that was happening, it probably would have been appropriate a few years ago. to start expanding it so we wouldn't end up with just having the city limits be exactly the same as the urban growth boundary. But just like the rest of Central Oregon, nobody envisioned the growth that we've had. And so we have to prepare for that. One of the things I wanted to bring up and mention, I wanted to ask, when we get into the process, it's going to be a process with the county, is it not?
Yes, correct.
will
I mean,
be- they
they're
will
amending
their
their,
part.
their comprehensive plan at the same time we're amending ours
And
because
because what we take, they have to give. At what stage in that do we make an agreement with the county on what rules will apply to the urban growth boundary? Are those rules that come from the state, or is there, it sounds like that we can have some agreement with the county on what regulations control that urban growth area?
yeah, so you're talking about like a joint management agreement
Right.
because if we bring parcels into the county or into our urban growth boundary, they will remain in the county until such time a property owner requests annexation. So I think your question relates to what happens to the property in the meantime. Well, it's in the urban growth boundary, but still in the county. And there are agreements. I think I've seen them. I'm sure that they're probably in every community that in Oregon that has that situation. But dictates, if there's a land use proposal in the urban growth boundary, but it's still in the county, is it sometimes it's the city that reviews it, but uses the county's development code to enforce it. If there's an urban reserve area, which is that area that's even beyond the urban growth boundary, typically the county is still the body that enforces the code. So I would imagine that agreement kind of comes into place probably pretty close to when you establish that urban growth boundary expansion. And that could be part of that coordination with the county.
The reason I asked that is if you didn't see it in the newspaper, there was an article about Wallowa where a dollar store was placed in the urban growth boundary,
But outside the city limits.
but outside the city limits based on city zoning. But they did not have to hook up to city water and sewer. And they said that it was cheaper for them to put in a septic system than to hook up to the city water and sewer. What it didn't say was who approved it, under what rules. Did the county allow it and the city didn't have any say, or did the city allow it and that was okay? And at the same time, of course, the community was very upset because there was any number of commercial empty buildings in their downtown that were empty. And then they had a dollar store of some kind out in the urban growth boundary that was moving forward. And it was just like, how did that happen? So hopefully our agreement we would have with the county would spell that out better. Thank you.
Hopefully fill in the gaps.
Fill in the gaps, yeah. That left me with lots of questions. Thank you.
Councilor Cobb, and haven't spoken if you want to.
No, we said it pretty much before,
Okay.
the meeting prior to, and we gave the head nod.
Okay.
You know, it's basically our duty to do this.
I believe that to be true as well. Then we can probably entertain a motion, I believe.
I move to initiate the urban growth boundary amendment process.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Thank you.
I guess we're going forward.
Yeah.
What's the first step? Can you tell us that?
The first step would be to create an RFP process to solicit proposals from qualified consultants to do the work, and then interview them and select one that we think is best qualified to pull off the project.
All right.
And so that process could take up to 3 months, I think, to probably finally get through all that. So maybe hopefully sometime mid-spring, hopefully have a consultant on board to start the process.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to other business staff comments. We're gonna let our city manager, if his voice can handle it.
Getting through there. I'm gonna have to clear my throat a lot, but making it through. I was gonna add to the conversation about, what happens in between, and in the metro area, in urbanized areas, you would have what we call them, UGMAs. It's a nice term.
What was?
UGMAs, urban growth management areas, and you lay out basically who's responsible for what. How do you apply your facilities planning for utilities? Make it clear that if there's like a land division application that comes in for a parcel that's in the county but in the city's urban growth, it would be processed kind of through the city in our rules instead of the county, or require annexation. So you have these trigger points. So that'll be one of the things that will cover us, and I'm sure I've already talked to the county, and they're a happy partner with us on this endeavor. So, there is a lull in development activity, as you probably have noticed, which, not in terms of actual construction that's happening, but in terms of land use activity, which I think is good timing for our staff, because we have a number of, code updates that were underway, the tree code, for example, tonight, and then kicking off this UGB process. And then, on top of that, another idea came up tonight on the development code side, in terms of urban forestry. And, I think we're all kind of disappointed when we see things like, the 48-inch caliber tree come down. There's might be some things that we can propose to council too on that side, is more tree protection. It's more work on staff, sure, more work on the development. But any significant tree, what you could do is, put a plan into place and make them actually protect the trees at the drip lines, fence them off, have that actually, have staff go out and certify that, basically make sure that they put the protections in place, so that you don't have these mistakes happen as often when they cut down the wrong tree, because they forget that, I don't know if this is the case, but they forget that red means, don't cut, green means do, or whatever. And so, there's things that we can propose, but this is the opportunity to kind of proceed with some of these development code updates that we have, in the process with STRs, the tree code, and other, development code updates that our staff can work on during this kind of slight lull. And speaking of that, the county has cut back their labor force in the building department. If you've seen some of the metrics that, I think Sisters is one of the few places that continues to get some building permits through. I think we had another dozen or so that the Woodlands stepped up. So we still have some construction activity going here, but it's definitely slowed in the other parts of the county. Okay, pivoting to other stuff, real quick before I lose my voice. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I did manage to get one of the kids out to the tree lighting, and I'm sure you'll talk about it. It was a great event. I did talk to the director at SPRD. They were excited about how the event went, but noticed that there's a lot that they continue to improve on. This was the first year kind of doing the parade and the tree lighting on Saturday combined. So yeah, they're excited about how to evolve that event, and kind of, notice things that they can continue to improve and change. And yeah, it was great to see a nice crowd there, and the countdown and the tree lighting. And I also wanted to thank the Public Works crews for getting up the lights, the decorations in town. It's super festive, and all the businesses that participate here too. It's fantastic. It was pretty fun. Kind of come through.
It's easier to notice a business that doesn't participate.
Yeah, I know.
It looks
It's a
very,
dark spot.
it looked very grinchy when they don't.
Yeah, you almost want to give them some lights, The last things, the county commission did have a hearing on the TSP. Recall in our joint meeting with the commission, that was one of the topics. So they did have they held their public hearing. I believe they closed the oral testimony, and they're taking public comments for another week. And so that I think will be next week. They'll have the close of the written record, and then we'll see where they go from there. And then, as the mayor mentioned, the population projections, the preliminary population projections for PSU did come out late last week, and then we received the letter this week. We are now projected at 3,778 people. One of the faster growing cities in Oregon, percentage wise. I think that kind of reflects some of the recent developments, multifamily developments, things like that that have come online. So those will get certified December 15th. Yeah, we're growing.
Our population sign of the city limits it should be evolving like
Yeah.
a slot machine.
Well, we can make it, electronic. Have Paul can just add, a number here and there.
As opposed to little community name, whose name I can't pronounce, the sign says population, not much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. So I'll turn it over to Carrie.
We were awarded, I think you heard last week, the Ford Family Foundation, the $20,000 for the Civic Leadership Academy. And on that, the Ford Family Foundation is going to send, for one of our meetings, come down and listen and see what we're doing. They're super interested in this project. They were actually the folks that suggested that we do it for 2 years instead of 1. So it's really nice to have their support in that. We also have, and I think I mentioned this before, support from the Roundhouse Foundation, C4C, got a grant from the Roundhouse to do kind of the food and the application process and the advertising for this event. So there's a lot of support from some of our rural foundations for this project. I'm working right now with Portland State University on the agreement. We'll more than likely bring it to you at the December 13th meeting, and that will be for the 2 years. It'll be a $50,000 agreement, of which Ford Family Foundation has the $20,000 and we contribute 30,000 over 2 years. If you remember, this year's budget we committed 25,000 for 1 year, so we're just a little bit more. We'll end up getting the 2-year pilot, which is great. We are finishing up board interviews tomorrow at the Parks Board tomorrow. Thank you for all your participation and all your time that you spent in this building over the past few days. And then we will reach back around and have those appointments happen at the December 13th meeting as well. And other things coming your way, and I think we spoke to this at the last meeting, 2 ordinances coming your way at the December 13th meeting, the contracting code and the TDS franchise agreement. And then tomorrow we do have an Explore Sisters board meeting and a Charo meeting.
Oh, boy. That makes you busy, doesn't it? Any questions?
You want to come back up, Scott? No.
I think Carrie just mentioned the Parks Board interviews. I don't believe she mentioned the Planning Commission interviews. I'm sorry.
All the interviews.
You did all those. Okay, sorry. We have a Planning Commission public hearing next week on the Dark Skies ordinance, finally. So fingers crossed that'll get approved, but there's been a lot of work that's gone on over the last 3 or 4 months with Planning Commission and the council and working with our Dark Sky consultant. So we think we have a really good ordinance to propose to the Planning Commission. And if it's approved by the Planning Commission, we will schedule it with the City Council in January. So making some progress there. Somebody mentioned building permits. There are still, it's got, the rate's gone down, but there's still a steady supply or steady number of permits coming through the door, mostly through the Woodlands project and now the Sunset Meadows development that's getting ready to start going vertical on some of their units out there, starting with the apartments that they initially were a little reluctant to go forward with the apartments early on, but they kind of changed their tune, and that's going to go in probably on in addition with some single family and some townhomes that have recently come in the door, but it's nice to see an emphasis on multifamily units out there.
That's different than developments past.
That is correct. Yep. Those other development codes other development code amendments that we're working on, you've heard about the defensible space, you've heard about dark skies. Short-term rental is efforts to continue with that process and to bring you back some more information are ongoing. Matt's been undertaking that, and he's got a survey prepared that he's soon to send out to all STR licensees to kind of learn more about what their experience is with the SDR, how often that they rent it out. Do they rent it out as an ADU? Do they rent out a room in their house? Do they rent out the whole house? How many times through the year do they typically do it? Would you be interested in renting it long-term if you didn't have a short-term rental? Just to get a little more information so that we can bring that information back and kind of help tailor any changes we make to the short-term rental based on kind of real information that we get from those groups. So it's looking, I think in late January is the next time we'll come back to council with more information and some different alternatives, more refined alternatives that you guys can consider and give direction on. And we'll continue to kind of work it back and forth between the council and the planning commission because the planning commission will have to make a recommendation on it as well. We did have an appeal hearing on a code enforcement issue that's been ongoing in the community. Several weeks ago, we have a hearings officer that we contract with that presided over that. And the outcome of that was that there was a request by the property owner to get an extension on the cleanup, which the staff considered but did not support because we felt that there had been, I think we counted 140 days since the first notice of violation, and we had given an extension at one time because their attorney had made had cited the like fair housing and ADA that there was a disability, and so we gave them extra time to find an attorney for representation. So we felt like we'd given plenty of time, and so we did not support that request. And so what happens now is that the hearings officer has 60 days to make a decision on which way she rules on it. It was interesting that the property owner did not contest the violations. So I think we think that it'll be more of a matter of what the fine would be at this point versus whether.
Put 4 chairs.
On oxygen here. It's a long walk. Sit down.
I hope your legs
good
are
evening.
awake.
They are. Yeah, I didn't stumble. So last time I reported on the online payment system going live, I believe it was the following Monday of that meeting, and it is live now. It's been going really well. We have about 200 people signed up, which is pretty good. It's about 10% or so of our billing population. So people are engaging and using the interface fairly easily, it seems. It's been well received, really neat. You can see a lot of the consumption detail on there by year. So it's nice. You have all the historical data on there too. It's not just today going forward. So really neat tool for everybody. So we've got a lot of good feedback on that. Still going through some teething things in terms of sending forms back and forth because we still have a third party bill sending company that we use. So just a lot of those little things that always add up to a lot of time. But staff has been great with that. Kim and Julie, obviously, they really kind of put a lot of time and a lot of the patience into helping people with that kind of transition there. So recruiting, we've got the deputy recorder recruitment ending on Friday. I've had some really good interest, some really good applicants. So kind of really happy with those, kind of surprised as to some of the qualifications a couple of these folks have. So kind of exciting stuff on that end. And then property taxes. So as you know, property taxes were due on the 15th of this month, and we've got about 89% of our levy taxes already in, which is actually quite a bit higher as a percentage than we got last year. Last year, I think it was maybe mid 80s, maybe 85, 84%. So that's good. It's usually easier to collect that as the year goes on. You know, so that was a pretty big chunk. I was surprised by that. And then just a couple of things, you know, just trying to stay up on kind of payroll and all sorts of administrative rulings. So we've gone to a couple of webinars for Department of Revenue and actually met with a Pay Leave Oregon. You remember that, that program? I met with one of their representatives today. Really interesting stuff. One of the takeaways, luckily we're participating in it, but there's a lot of businesses that aren't. They just don't know about it. So she's doing as much as she can to reach out and
Living under a rock.
yeah, I mean, my, you know, you could ask for that pay leave, I believe in September 1st, but still a lot of companies just not participating. So my guess is there'll be a lot of grace if things are caught. But it was kind of disheartening to see that so many weren't participating. So she's going to send us actually a big box of brochures. And I talked with Eric Strobel today, and he's going to go around and distribute those as much as he can, just to keep people informed. You know, because it could be a huge benefit to a lot of employees in our town and throughout the area in the state.
So
of
if I go to
course.
the Bahamas, I get the same pay that I do now?
So it's not the same pay. There's a limitation to it.
I think with me, it'd be the same pay.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, you wouldn't get all the food.
Yeah.
So anyway, and strategizing, you know, just how in practice some of the companies are enacting the Pay Leave Oregon. And how we can still, you know, help our employees benefit if they're taking that leave and to get that full, kind of that full pay, even though they're only taking partial pay with the Pay Leave program. Yeah, I think that's about all I have.
Just
We're
make
down
sure the
to-
internet,
Questions.
just make sure the internet keeps working, will you?
Does it keep kicking you
No,
off?
it's-
Oh, okay.
1 second on.
We paid our bill, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
As
man.
far as I know,
They,
mine works.
they did it.
Maybe
through
it's 'cause
the-
I pay
They
it.
did it through the new bill pay portal, so
Yeah.
Right.
it's probably
Right.
coming from the third-party provider.
Yeah, yep. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Public Works.
Okay, I think if you guys were praying for snow, it might actually work.
Uh-oh.
We're getting ready for that. We got all the gear ready to go, including the de-icer truck you guys approved. In this year's budget. We sent out letters to our downtown business owners, just a reminder that we have a contractor under contract that will do snow removal on the parking and sidewalks, public. Hood, essentially. And when that happens is typically not a heads up, and if they have any questions, they can give me a call. We met today with our SDC consultant. We're making really good progress on the water and sewer SDC updates. After the first kind of analysis, there are a couple data points that we need to update, and then he can draft his report and we can bring that to you. We're hoping in January. So making good progress there.
Can I ask a question on that right now?
I'll
With
try.
SBC? We're still giving me the cheapest in Central Oregon by far, right?
We'll let you know on that.
Okay.
I believe so, but we'll let you know on
I'm
that.
pretty sure we're still gonna
haven't
be, even
done-
with the rate raise, we will still be I mean, we're way less than Ben Redmond. I know that, so.
That's for sure. We haven't done the complete analysis for Central Oregon though, but we
Doesn't wanna
will.
make any promises.
Yep.
I gotcha. Thank you.
And lastly, we got an interesting development with ODOT. And if you remember a couple years ago, there were a lot of guys downtown with levels and safety vests on, 3 or 4 on each ADA ramp all the way through town, including out to the Barkley roundabout.
No.
This is all part of their ADA case that got settled, that they have so much time to upgrade and bring into compliance with the new ADA guidelines, all the curb ramps in the state of Oregon. So they did their survey. There are several of our ramps in downtown that don't meet their new specs, including some ramps out at the Barkley roundabout. Very frustrating. You're down there, you're walking on them, they look great, but the tolerances are essentially, there are no tolerances. So if there's
Either complies or it doesn't.
even a little bit of a vertical issue, it fails and they basically have to replace them. So
Wow. Yeah, and when they have so much extra money.
yeah, so which I think is resulting in kind of a different spin that they're doing right now. We're meeting with them next week. They have drafted an agreement with local municipalities where they will essentially, and I don't know the specifics of it, but it's an agreement that would allow us to say, you don't need to do these for the city of Sisters. So with that, we're going to have our legal team look at it very closely. We're going to have our engineer look at it very closely, and we'll give you an update. But we'll be meeting with Bob Townsend next week.
Question, if we were to do them, that's gonna cost, right? Us and them?
We'll have to know, yeah, like I said, we'll follow back up with you on specifics.
Okay.
But it would allow us to potentially
Step away.
do the repairs without, which could be grinding a little bit
That's what I was getting at.
versus ripping out the entire.
Yep.
So that could be the advantage.
I
So
think, like I said, ODOT has to.
at
pull it
least we
in.
potentially could control our own destiny a little bit. But again, that agreement's going to be
And
clear.
take on the liability possibly.
Well, there are sidewalks anyway, so we're already liable for that.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
That's all I have. There's any questions, anything you guys want to know?
No roundabout updates.
Roundabout update is that final plans are in Salem, waiting for the state traffic engineer to approve. We're still teed up for our early February bid let date and our early April construction date. So I'll be meeting with the Region 4 crew next week. We're going to start strategizing on the public outreach that's going to be done prior to construction to let everybody know, detour routes, timing, those type of details that we like to do closer to the project so people hopefully don't forget as quickly.
Any point in doing it before Christmas?
No,
No.
we're still 4 months out from, the first of the year. So
Right. Good.
people forget within a month.
Yeah.
So we'll be a lot closer.
So no earth is moving until April. Is that right?
That's, yeah, correct,
All right.
correct.
And with the snow removal, it comes all the way out to Locust,
It does.
right? So includes in front of the school property here and,
For the
gas
civic
station.
campus, we take care of with the school district. That's not part of the contract. So,
Their sidewalks are not part of the contract?
no.
Okay, that explains a lot. But like maybe the gas station.
Gas station is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just over the years, I've noticed that because of the location of there's no parking strip. people drive by, everything, either the snow plow or just people snow, they can come and clear off the sidewalk, but then half an hour later, it's covered and snow plow comes by, it's all covered up again, and then nobody does anything about it. Like the property owner doesn't do it, and then, I think the contractor has done their work and they don't, and so it can it's a huge hot mess to try to walk through every year because, nobody does anything about it. So at what point is that more the property owner's responsibility?
So it's 100% the property owner's responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah, to keep that ice and snow cleared. We help out, but when we mobilize our contractor, we're very, I guess, conservative with it because it is $6,500 every time you mobilize them. So, and we may need to mobilize them multiple times a day in a heavy snow event. So we got to be prepared for that. So if it's a little bit of snow or slush removal, we're not going to have them come in to remove just debris from here and there. We're going to actually wait for a full-on snowstorm. So
It always seems like a fight, like the plow comes by, it's on the
Mhm.
sidewalk.
Yeah.
Scrape it off and you put
Well,
it
they
down. and the
park,
plow
they
comes
they
by.
park down at the end of the street and they
That's
wait
true.
until I'm done. They watch the
Yeah.
binoculars, I see them down there.
And we, like I said, we try to strategize and our crews come in, clean the travel lanes, then we bring in our contractor. But storms just don't behave
No,
all
they
the time.
No, they don't.
So, yeah. But anyway,
Thanks.
bet.
Thank you.
All right, it's up to us. Who wants to go first? Come on, Counselor. Oh, you got it?
Go first.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Counselor Letts, go ahead.
Well, I have the most, so it'll be downhill. Let's see, we're going back 3 weeks. We had an EDCO meeting, a board meeting, which was interesting because they brought in the leadership from the Redmond Airport, Bend Airport, Prineville Airport, to kind of give us an update, regionally what's going on with all the airports, which was actually really fascinating to know what was going on. I mean, Redmond and Bend are two of the busiest airports in the entire state. Redmond, one of the busiest, they just came into third place. They just surpassed Medford in passenger boardings and offboardings.
Wow.
So they're third for passenger traffic, and then Bend is third for takeoffs and landings in the state. A lot of that because of the helicopter school there. But Bend's on the way to getting their tower, though they're running into some issues with the county because they're not zoned for a structure that tall. So that's a work in progress. And then Redmond has obviously a very, very ambitious multi-phase expansion project that you probably have seen. Well, not the Core 3, just the passenger
Oh, okay.
regional air side of it. So, and you saw that they just got added, they finally got one flight to Portland back.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but though I think that's only like seasonal. Again, it's mostly a pilot shortage. Still struggling with that, but they're like, fly it, because if nobody flies it, then it's just gonna go away. So, but that'll help with those connecting flights to Portland, because that's been a non-starter for a long time, so.
And we could have did that at Portland in 5 years, It's like.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, so I have all the presentations, if anybody wants to see their presentations and their expansions and everything like that, but those airports are humming for sure. All of them, Bend and Prineville more on the training side and industrial side, manufacturing, so really interesting. And also attended the I don't know if anybody else did. I didn't see anybody else there, but I probably didn't cross paths. The Mosaic open house, opening their pediatric clinic by the school. So that's exciting. So again, we have 4 days a week that is open for anyone 0 to 18, and you don't have to be a student in school district to access that. So and they've, I feel like they're they're hoping this is a first phase of their presence in the community. So,
Too.
yeah, hopefully they're successful there, and really nice facility they have there, and behavioral health specialists that they have, as well as from county, are there as well. Then, also had we have the kind of ad hoc meet and group, with some community leaders trying to chip away at this daycare crisis we have here. And so we had a good meeting with, a provider out of Boardman that I met at the LOC conference. We had a good meeting with her about how they got their daycare up and running, with some really creative ideas. So we'll be bringing that to our daycare group, next week, I think is our next meeting. And trying to move forward on something to help with that problem. Attended, also, the city club, which was on, electric bikes, more on the kind of safety side of it. But also, I went to the, bicycle and pedestrian, committee summit the month before, which there was a topic of electric bikes. And the takeaway is that, this is no surprise or not a bad thing at all. Electric bikes are here and they're here to stay. They're exploding in popularity, no matter the age group, even though 15 and under aren't legally supposed to be riding them or operating them. The federal government's actually working on a definition of electric bikes, which is going to really help law enforcement nationwide, because there is no teeth right now there's not even a definition, so you can't even begin to address any education or law enforcement issues with them. So, I mean, the one thing I walked away with, between those two events was that what electric bikes are doing is they're, kind of revolutionizing how we can get from point A to point B, which is fantastic, but and really opening it up to a lot of different people. But the downside is it's really highlighting our lack of safe infrastructure for anybody on any sort of bike or pedestrian. It's kind of the straw breaking the camel's back at this point. It's just adding enough people into the mix. It's not necessarily that they're any more dangerous. It's just there's just more bikes now, and it's just really showing the weaknesses in our facilities. So my takeaway was that, the more we can do to make sure we have the infrastructure, the bike paths, of just safer infrastructure, now into the future, the better off we're going to be, certainly into the future, because these aren't.
So is there the sense that the bikes that can go fast without pedaling, that they should be on bike paths?
That's,
as
that's,
opposed
yeah,
on the
that's
street?
that's the big question. I mean, there's 3 classes. Basically the first 2 are, sort of pedal assist, which most people don't have a problem with. It's that third one that is just basically a quasi motorcycle.
Right.
And you have the motorcycle industry also working on electric motorcycles, and it's getting very gray on where you draw the line and what's
And the
street.
only enforcement they have is speed, like.
Yeah.
If it's over 30, it's a street vehicle, and if it's under whatever. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I
not.
love 20 miles an hour
And
going
it-
down the sidewalk.
Yeah, and
It's hard to judge that.
right.
I think they're gonna have to come, at some point, we have to come to the issue where what I call a throttle e-bike, the ones you don't pedal, are probably going to be treated like a motorcycle. I think they need to require a license on them, whether they go 20 or 40.
And training.
And then that helps you with the juvenile problem.
Right.
But we have a couple people in town that have throttle driven e-bikes, and they zip around. I see them go down Locust Street
Those
faster than the
things
cars.
On the hoverboards,
Oh, the one wheels, yeah.
One
they
wheel,
go
one wheel.
pretty fast.
Well, and those, I mean, those are the things that
Yeah, yeah.
cops and ER
Interesting.
people complain about the most, are the
Yeah,
one wheels.
need
It's
to
not
do something.
so much the e-bikes, so. But the state house is working on, kind of the legal side of it, kind of trying to catch up. But it is those class 3 that are, they're going to have to be regulated on some level, because it's a totally unregulated industry right now. I also attended the EDCO Pub Talk with Eric and just some, interesting businesses starting up in the community and succeeding. It's always a fun event, and it's open to, obviously, to all of us. I'm always impressed with that event. It's really well put together. So every other month, if you want to go. I attended the Habitat for Humanity open house they had at 2 of their new homes on Desert Rose Place. So got to, chat with some of their board and staff members there. So that was really nice to see those projects being completed, you know, and those traditional projects. But exciting to make that contact. And then, yeah, attended the parade and the tree lighting both. Parade was, I saw the mayor there waving.
Dancing.
Yeah. And, no, those are both, great events. The parade was really well attended and long and a lot of fun.
The paper said 3,000 people.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what the paper said. I was like,
Well,
whoa.
you have a better idea. You were like.
Well, it was a lot. I mean, but they were going
Above.
by.
So,
Now
but yeah,
there's
that's
ton of
about it.
people in town.
You had the Batmobile,
Oh, yeah.
front page of the Nugget.
Yeah, but yeah, that's about it. That's,
I got to follow Lieutenant Davis and usually it's him following me. So
Yes,
it
it was a
was
good
kind of a refreshing thing. The one thing I have to say about Mosaic, they need to get together with the quilt show and be a sponsor.
Yep.
Mosaic and quilt show, come on, it's just match made in heaven.
Yep.
Council Cobb.
Okay, I want to know what's happening with helping the local unhoused, what we're doing in the background, if anything. Cause it's cold out there.
Nothing public to report yet, and we continue to have these internal conversations. I've had conversations with some agency partners too about is there ways to partner and maybe cooperate. I think I had notified the council that the appeal period for the cold weather shelter application had lapsed, and so there was not an appeal submitted, and that was one of the kind of you know, milestones that we were waiting for.
Yeah.
I think Carrie and I had talked about perhaps reaching out to the cold weather shelter too to get an update on their status right now. I know they've been doing a lot of outreach in the forest and kind of continue to do the services they were doing for the last couple of years. And then we're watching the weather, as Paul mentioned, and kind of as we turn into winter now with prolonged periods of cold weather, especially as the moisture comes in, it becomes a little bit more concerning, especially when it doesn't heat up during the day. So we're monitoring that.
So, the First Street building, that's gonna be used by the Kiwanis Club, is it? And then is there a break would the city be offering that possibly if it was needed for a cold weather shelter?
Our plan right now is, so that's going to be leased to the Lions Club until the end of December.
Okay.
We're going to be working on an RFP, probably getting that out at the start of the year, sometime in January is our goal. We know we have a lot of community interest, mostly nonprofits that are looking at that space, and would want to speak with the council too about how we craft this RFP. But I think one of the things that we want to wait, what is a public benefit that would be offered for utilizing that space? So we're preparing for that, and that's sort of been the plan that we've been kind of operating under. So, you know, that's going to kind of be going at the same time as the winter time.
Okay. Okay. And then you did mention, Mayor, that we're gonna be revising our goals. When is that on our schedule? Is that
Well,
January?
Yes,
why don't you go ahead? I know you got some news about that.
Okay.
yeah, so we've been working on a couple ideas here. So the council currently sets goals on a fiscal year. And I think we're not proposing to change that we're halfway through the current set of goals. The council sets goals and then we roll right into the budget process. That informs the budget process. We come back to you with the proposed budget and you get to see those goals reflected in there. But that also means we don't really kick off on a lot of the work on those goals until the fiscal year starts, right? So we're only about halfway through your current list of goals. And there's a lot of progress and accomplishments already.
Yeah.
So the idea is on December 13th, during the work session, we're going to give an update on where we're at with the list of goals. So you get a status update. That's going to give you one piece of information as you go into the next cycle for goal setting for your 2024 and 25 goals, which will happen starting at the beginning of the year. We're planning on doing a community roundtable
having folks come and speak with counselors in an informal setting, kind of share their ideas. Here's some ideas what I think the council, the city should be doing in the next year. At the same time, I think we'll try to do sort of an online survey so folks that can't show up to the roundtable can give input that way. And then the council will have a retreat. I think we're targeting early February. So we'll gather that information, that input. You'll have the existing goals where we're at, what needs to be continued. You'll get, staff input that way. You'll get community input, and then you can go into your retreat to set your goals for the next fiscal year.
Excellent.
And so that's all new, and that's a goal that we had for this year, which is have, as much public outreach as possible and improve those areas. And I think that this is one of the ways we're gonna do that, which is have an extended process for getting input from the community on the goals that we want, so they can help, instead of just the people that are working it. You know what I mean? So I think
Thank
it's
you.
great.
Yeah. So I think I know why the guy cut the tree down. Cause there's red ribbons and there's green ribbons. He's probably colorblind.
It's possible.
That's why we have a sliding scale on the fine.
Yeah. It's a sad thing, but it was.
All right. Anything more? You
No.
good?
Just a couple things real quickly. Jennifer mentioned the Habitat Open House. I was also there. It was interesting in the presentation today where they talked about some of the things that they wanted to do to make the houses less expensive to operate for the homeowners. The new houses that they've just put in are pre-wired for a car charger in the garage. They've also put in hybrid hot water heater is in there as well. And so, and they sourced them. They were very smart. They had the Bend Habitat buy them for them because then they could get the Energy Trust credit. And then they sold them to Sisters Habitat and they've gone into the house
For cost.
Yeah, and so, and their strategy is to put a larger hot water heater in than it needs because the way the hybrids work, once the water's hot, the heat pump maintains it. And so the amount of house usage would mean that it hardly would ever go into the electric heating system that's built into those. It would be able to maintain it pretty much with the heat pump, except maybe right about now when the weather's real cold. The garage will be even colder because it's essentially like an air conditioner.
Sure.
But I was happy to see that they were incorporating that into the house. And I had a long discussion actually with them about solar panels because they were trying to decide whether or not they needed to do it. And I said, come to my house and I'll show you how it works. They didn't have to take me up on that because it looks like they already made that decision. But I would have been happy to show them. I think that's a smart move. And then the Urban Forestry Board met, and aside from the discussion, which we've already covered related to the permit and everything else, the other thing that's a little disturbing, and there's nothing much we can do, but we're starting to see the effects of the long-term drought in our urban forest and our city trees. I can't remember how many were on the list to be removed this time, but it was 6, 7. Yeah, and a number of them in Creekside, all kind of in the same area in the campground. And others around town, and some of them are not small trees, but they're obviously dead, and it's the effect of the drought. And so that's why I think when we start talking about it, how we protect trees within the urban canopy of the entire town, including those on private property, even with private property rights, we have to realize that it's to the benefit of this community and to the environment and all those other things that everybody likes to talk about to try to keep as much of our urban forest intact as we can.
How about part of the penalty? You make them plant trees too.
That, that's, yep.
Not just, it's not about money. You're taking away trees, so you knock one down.
Maybe
put three in.
if you cut down a big pond in the development, you have to put 4 sucker aspens right where it was.
All right, you're up.
The only thing I think you might be interested in, we had a DEQ presentation at COAC talking about the advanced clean fleets. Our COAC board has the big trucks, commercial
Yep.
big representation on it, and this is coming down. The electrification and non-carbon footprint standards are coming down fast and furious. I have information on it if anybody is particularly interested. And the standards are going to be, you know, are not what you have to buy. The standards are what they have to sell. The manufacturers have to sell a greater percentage each year. And so, you know, of course, the manufacturers are going, well, what if nobody wants to buy them? You know, you know, it's not us who decides. So it's hard for them to envision how we can say, oh, well, next year we're going to sell 20% more electric vehicles, you know, when the transportation companies are going, well, but how's that going to fit with our hours? You know, they go from Portland and then they have to stop somewhere for 8 hours and recharge because they're huge, great big trucks and it's not quick to recharge. And is the infrastructure going to be there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the gal from the DEQ was very good in that she said, well, you know, we are replicating and following what's happening in California. They're always the first ones out of the box. And she said, that's working well in the sense that we can see where the demand is too fast for the supply, where this is coming, you know, it is an unreasonable demand, and then we can modify and work along the way. But it's the industry people are just scared stiff about it for sure. One of the ideas that I thought was interesting is they said, well, what about if we just had pre-charged batteries? So instead of going to a truck stop and charging, they just swapped out the battery and gave you a new battery, and then you could get right on the road. And, you know, is that a possibility? So there's all kinds of different ideas that are floating around.
Tesla actually explored that probably before they had all the big charging stations. They had a plan where you could drive into a facility, this device go unscrew your battery, screw a new battery in, and off you go.
A robotic.
The trick was that you had to pick your original battery up on the way back. So that
Ah.
and the reason was in case your battery was getting old, and I'll just go swap it, you know.
Yeah.
But
You had to
yeah,
do a round
it
trip.
never really came to fruition. They did some mess with it.
But maybe for the
Yeah,
trucking.
who knows? It
industry,
might
that
be
could
something.
done.
Yeah.
And so, and their concern is that the mandates are going to come faster than the infrastructure to deal with those mandates. And that is going to impact our ability to get products across the nation once again, and we've dealt with that during COVID, and nobody wants to see that happening again. The other, and of course, that this is all coming at a time when ODOT has diminishing funds. And at a time when we have a short legislative session, and we have not seen any proposals for the short session to try and deal with that diminishment in funds or a plan to get behind. So our COAC board is saying, okay, what can we do? What are we for? What are we in favor? How are we, where do we put pressure? Who do we lobby on, on what? Because there are no proposals out there. So it's a great frustration, and especially the cities, predominantly Bend, is seeing their revenue from the gas tax go down, and we haven't had a huge impact here, but we will eventually have a diminishment of that. And so what do we as a community how are we going to replace those funds when it happens to us? So are we going to wait for the state to come up with a program that's going to at some point distribute once again some portion of whatever they decide to do back to us? Or do we want to consider our own gas tax? Community, Deschutes, Crook, and Jefferson, or even Deschutes County, to alleviate the issue. Do we want to be proactive or just wait and see what happens? So it's kind of up in the air. It doesn't seem like the legislature's doing much. Maybe there are subcommittees that are really working on it, but when you ask the DEQ person, when you ask the ODOT person, of course, the ODOT person says, we don't get into those political matters. We can't discuss those. That's not part of our,
But they're gonna want the money.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But they, we hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So our COAC committee is considering and looking into what, if we have any lobbying that needs to be done, how we've been on, what would we before? And hopefully I've put the bee in the mayor's ear so that he can, do the same at COCO and different organizations that you're in, or the mayor's association or what, because I'm sure all the cities are gonna go through the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any choice but to raise a gas tax.
But once again, that's just a diminishing thing, so it's
Yeah.
not like,
Well, I know, and then eventually the price of charging your car will go higher.
and,
Ben doesn't even have a gas tax.
right. But one of the main reasons that they say they feel that they haven't been able to get one is because people recognize that they can just go outside of the city limits and get gas for cheaper.
We can talk about this later. I'll give you the whole backstory.
Oh, okay.
I was there.
Okay. So that's the only thing I have that's of interest to the board, I think.
Okay. I guess I'm last. The thing that's taken most of my time is leading COCO in Central Oregon in the fight against Oregon Water Resources Commission in their rulemaking process about how future water allocations will happen. Most people don't even know Central Oregon and the Deschutes Basin has a water mitigation program that was started by a bunch of different organizations in Central Oregon, COCO being one of them. That's gonna sunset in 2029. And right now the state is changing the rules and they kind of don't care that we have a water mitigation program that our city has been getting water from for a long time. These rules have been, it's probably been 10 or 15 years in place, and they're creating a one size fits all rulemaking process. New rule stuff that, frankly, it just doesn't work for Deschutes, the Deschutes Basin. It probably works for most of the other basins. But the problem is, if these rules go into effect as they are, it's likely that a lot of users in Central Oregon will not be able to get future water allocations, which is a very big problem for cities because we have 75% of the population, but we only use 4% of the water, and they're not coming up with any creative ways to figure out how to make it work. And some of the rules just say, hey, if the aquifer goes down by a certain amount, then that's it. There will just be no new water allocations whatsoever. Well, that basically means they're putting a moratorium in effect. And we're the Deschutes COCO, especially, or only COCO, and some of our partners are like, hey, this is crazy. There's got to be a way to have basin-specific, place-based science kind of make some sense out of this. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to work with OWRD and the Water Commission, but we're also going to work with legislators and, try and make it make sense. And that's what, it's been a lot of my time. I mean, 5 hours a week just on that, the last month. And, it doesn't sound like a lot, but I do work and I have family and all that stuff too, and be a mayor. So that's been taking most of my time. We are going to have a COCO annual luncheon in December. I think it's Monday the 18th, if I have the date right. I don't have my calendar up. That'll be in Redmond. I'd like to invite you to come to that for sure. You guys are welcome to come too if you want to kind of see what COCO is about. The great part is a lot of our legislators will be there, both House and Senate, State Senate, and some people from the county might be there, and it's just kind of it's a regional gathering that we host, and it tries to can create consensus on some of the issues that we're trying to do. And water is going to be the big topic next month. Other than that, the tree lighting was fun. Yeah, I like to dance with the kids. I encourage that. Some of them came up. The Santa, I don't know if you met him or saw him, but he was really real looking and the best Santa I've ever seen. He looked like Santa. Parade was fun. And the last thing I'll say is I've noticed during this cold snap the last week or two, especially that downtown foot traffic is a little bit down. Even though we had the parade and stuff, it's been cold enough that it seems like, and I've heard some anecdotal stuff from our local businesses, that business is down a little bit. So I'm here to encourage everybody to shop local from here on out, if you can. And that's all I got. Thank you, everybody.
Well, I have one question.
Oh, here you go.
Jordan, just real quick, we've had asks from Roost, we've had asks from Habitat. How are we gonna handle that and circle back on those? Cause they're big asks and big projects, so. how are we gonna handle it?
We sort of been telling them, this was their opportunity to kind of share what their project, idea is, and what their sort of ask is. We have a current program with the Affordable Housing Fund, which is an annual grant program that usually kicks off on a calendar year basis, if I understand it correctly, right? And the timing on this was interesting with the I guess Trinity Place project, or I hear that name's going to change a few more times, but I'm kind of waiting and seeing what that project was before we knew exactly how much money we had in the kitty for affordable housing projects. One idea that we may want to explore is, well, we could do a workshop or maybe talk about a goal setting too. That's how you want to lay this out, but go through another application process, right? Do a more formal process for that part of the funding package that they're kind of requesting is basically the dollars from the Affordable Housing Fund. There's a lot of other ideas have been put on the table. We just haven't had a chance to really process that with you guys, SDC deferrals or credits or construction loans and other things that are really just kind of new ideas as they're trying to piece together their gap financing for these projects. And so we really need to just sit down and kind of just talk it over, kind of do the pros and cons of those different things. What other ideas we may be able to throw in to kind of help support these projects. But I think in fairness to what has already been established, we do need to kind of think about proceeding with a, sort of process for the existing affordable housing fund. And then on the whole other side of that, we have the urban renewal funds that we don't really have a process yet for. And we now have sort of this informal request to kind of be considered for that. And so we kind of need to kind of bring the board together on that component, but also we're getting close to needing to go out and getting financing for projects like the Roundabout, Parkway, other places that are, the Roundabout are affordable housing to free up money for the urban renewal fund. So that's probably going to be coming up on your schedule in the next month or so. Well, we'll go through the holidays, so.
Well, and I'm happy to hear that we're looking at all the different sorts of ways to do this. I think that this is kind of an odd time in a way, and it's also a good opportunity in a way to try to address some of our issues, but it's going to require out-of-the-box thinking by them, but also out-of-the-box thinking by us. I think if it's going to be a partnership, as they mentioned, we're going to have to be at the table to kind of have that discussion, and so it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. I mean, I don't have any, my crystal ball is not working, so, but I like what I'm hearing, and I think that we'll have to look at all those different options and then decide if it's going to work for us. But I do think that we have to think outside the box as a city as well as they have to think outside the box.
There's support and then there's support.
Yep.
And
yeah, there is. Yeah, definitely.
And there's an ask and then there's support, which can be anywhere in here,
Yes,
what I mean?
right. Yeah. So.
Don't know where, I mean,
All right.
love hearing the ideas though, and what a great presentation. I mean, seeing something come to life out of left field a little bit.
Yep.
You're
I mean-
talking about Habitat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's new.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known about it for a week.
And I know that super ambitious, all these projects, right? And they want to move fast. The Northwest Housing Alternatives, I think we're on year 2 or 3
Yeah.
at this point. So, we would like to keep pace with ambitious projects. We need affordable, we need workforce housing, but we also need to kind of get our ducks in the road too.
Yeah.
To be able to support that and do it in a way that's transparent and fair. to
Or else we'll all go to the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And thank you. And then I just want to say, condolences to the Nagel family with the loss of Jack. Big figure in town, so, big loss.
I think
there.
that's institutional knowledge about sisters that we just don't get from many
Yep.
people. So that was big.
Had a conversation with the day before. It was
Yeah.
shocked when I saw it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
No checks to sign? I signed them.
Oh.